Hello guys. Welcome to Soul Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto mastered the karma evolution like Boruto? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's dive into the story. The forest outside Konoha stood silent under the silver light of a full moon. Blood dripped from Naruto Uzumaki's fingertips, each crimson drop catching moonlight before disappearing into the shadows below. His breathing was steady despite the 5 Anbu Black Ops bodies scattered around him, not dead, but thoroughly incapacitated. "You really shouldn't have followed me," Naruto said, his voice deeper and more controlled than anyone in the village would recognize. Especially not with orders to detain by any means necessary. The last conscious Anbu captain struggled to lift his porcelain mask, cracked diagonally across its painted wolf design. "How did you know we were?" Sensing abilities beyond anything you've trained for, Naruto interrupted, rolling his shoulder where strange black markings pulsed beneath his torn sleeve. "Go back to Tsunade. Tell her I'll return when I've finished what I started." Turning away from the defeated shinobi, Naruto faced the ancient stone door embedded in the cliffside, the real reason he'd ventured alone into this forbidden section of the Land of Fire. Intricate seals covered its surface, patterns eerily similar to the markings that had begun spreading across his right arm 3 weeks ago after his encounter with the pale-skinned stranger who'd called himself a harbinger of the Otsutsuki. Naruto pressed his palm against the center of the door where the spiraling patterns converged. The black diamond-shaped mark on his palm, the karma, pulsed with blinding blue-white energy. The ancient stone groaned, then parted without resistance. "Just as he said it would," Naruto murmured, stepping into the darkness. Inside, the chamber hummed with residual chakra thousands of years old. At its center stood a crystalline structure containing what appeared to be a scroll suspended in blue light. As Naruto approached, the karma on his palm resonated, crawling further up his arm as geometric patterns expanded across his skin. "This is the missing piece," he whispered, reaching for the scroll. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, visions flooded his mind, planets consumed, civilizations harvested, godlike beings traveling between dimensions, and at the center of it all, the power he now carried within himself. The crystal shattered at his touch. The scroll fell into his waiting hand, ancient paper somehow untouched by time. When he unrolled it, the script rearranged itself before his eyes into characters he could understand. "The vessel's path to transcendence," Naruto read aloud, his voice echoing in the chamber. "So that's what I am to them. A vessel." He smiled, not the wide, innocent grin of his younger years, but something sharper, knowing. But vessels can choose what they contain. 3 days later, the guards at Konoha's east gate straightened as a figure approached through the morning mist. One reached for his weapon, then froze as recognition dawned. "Is that Naruto?" The young man walking toward them carried himself with a confidence that commanded attention. His traditional orange had been replaced with a fitted black combat suit accented with burnt orange trim. A sleeveless white haori bearing red flame patterns along its hem flowed behind him. But most striking was his face, still recognizably Naruto, but sharper, more defined, his whisker marks more pronounced against sun-kissed skin. "Open the gate," he called out, his voice carrying easily despite the distance. The guards hesitated, caught between protocol and the inexplicable authority radiating from the approaching shinobi. "Uzumaki Naruto, returning from an unauthorized absence," he clarified with a slight smile that somehow made them more uncomfortable than reassured. "I'm expected at the Hokage Tower." "We haven't received any," one guard began. "You will," Naruto interrupted, stopping before them. Up close, they noticed his eyes still brilliantly blue, but with an unusual pattern rippling just beneath the surface when the light caught them. As if on cue, a messenger hawk swooped down, landing on the guard station. The message it carried was brief. Uzumaki Naruto to be escorted directly to the Hokage upon arrival. Priority Alpha. The guards exchanged glances before the senior of the two nodded. "Follow me, Uzumaki-san." As they proceeded through the awakening village, whispers followed in their wake. Civilians and shinobi alike paused their morning routines to stare at Naruto, not with the old hatred or fear, but with confusion and curiosity. There was something fundamentally different about the young man they'd known all his life. "Naruto-kun." He turned to find Hinata Hyuga standing outside a tea shop, lavender eyes wide with surprise. She'd grown since he'd seen her last, her navy hair longer, her figure more defined beneath her training clothes. But most noticeable was how she met his gaze directly, with only a hint of her former shyness. "Hinata," he greeted, his voice warming, "you look well." She approached cautiously, studying him. "You've changed," she said, foregoing her typical stuttering. "Your chakra feels vast." Naruto smiled, genuinely this time. "Perceptive as always. We should catch up soon, there's much I'd like to discuss with you." A light blush colored her cheeks, but she maintained eye contact. "I'd like that." The guard cleared his throat. "Uzumaki-san, we need to proceed." With a respectful nod to Hinata, Naruto continued toward the Hokage Tower, aware of her gaze following him until he turned the corner. 3 weeks, Tsunade said, her hands folded tightly beneath her chin as she stared at Naruto across her desk. 3 weeks without authorization, communication, or explanation. 5 Anbu injured. And you walk in here looking like... She gestured vaguely at his transformed appearance. "Like I've evolved," Naruto finished for her. He remained standing despite her not offering him a seat, his posture relaxed yet commanding. "Explain yourself," she demanded. "And it better be good, or I don't care what power-up you think you've acquired, I'll have you in a containment cell until we determine you're not compromised." Instead of answering immediately, Naruto rolled up his right sleeve, revealing the intricate black patterns that now covered his arm from fingertips to shoulder, geometric shapes interspersed with what looked like sealing script. "This is called a karma," he explained calmly. "I received it during my last mission to the Land of Rivers. The target wasn't a rogue ninja as your intelligence suggested, he was something else entirely. Something ancient." Tsunade's eyes narrowed. "The mission where you were separated from your team for 6 hours?" Naruto nodded. He called himself Urashiki, claimed to be of the Otsutsuki clan, the same as Kagaya. He noted Tsunade's sharp intake of breath. "He was injured, dying. Said he needed a vessel to continue his work." "I thought he meant something like Orochimaru's body-snatching technique." "And it wasn't?" "No, the karma is more complex, a complete biological and spiritual data download. His essence, powers, memories, compressed into a seal that rewrites the host's genetic structure." Naruto flexed his hand, and for a moment, the black patterns glowed with blue energy. But he miscalculated. "My unique tenant interfered with the process." Understanding dawned on Tsunade's face. "The 9 tails." "Kurama," Naruto corrected. "His name is Kurama. And yes, his chakra created a barrier of sorts. Instead of being overridden, I gained access to Urashiki's knowledge while maintaining my identity. The past 3 weeks, I've been learning to control it before returning." Tsunade stood, circling her desk to examine the markings more closely. "And these Anbu I sent after you?" "A regrettable misunderstanding. They attacked first, I defended myself with minimal force." His expression remained neutral. "You should know there will be others coming. Urashiki wasn't acting alone." "Others? Like him?" "Otsutsuki clan members, yes. They work in pairs. Urashiki's partner will have sensed his death. And they're interested in more than just the tailed beasts." Before Tsunade could respond, the door burst open. Sakura Haruno stood in the doorway, breathless, her medical coat hastily thrown over her regular clothes. "Lady Tsunade, I heard Naruto was..." She stopped mid-sentence, green eyes widening as she took in the transformed young man before her. "Naruto?" He turned, offering her a small smile. "Hello, Sakura." She approached cautiously, medical training evident in how her eyes scanned him for abnormalities. "What happened to you? Your chakra signature is enormous." "It's a long story," he replied, then glanced back at Tsunade. "One I'd prefer to tell once, to everyone who needs to hear it. Can you assemble the Jonin Council and Team 7? Tsunade frowned at his presumption, but after a moment's consideration, nodded. 2 hours. My office. Until then, you're to remain under observation." "Fair enough," Naruto conceded. "I could use some ramen anyway. It's been a while." As if on cue, his stomach growled, breaking the tension. Sakura's lips twitched into a reluctant smile. "I'll escort him," she offered to Tsunade, medical observation. The Hokage nodded her approval, and Naruto followed Sakura from the office. In the hallway, she rounded on him immediately. 3 weeks, Naruto. Do you have any idea how worried everyone's been? Kakashi-sensei has barely slept. Sai's been drawing nothing but tracking birds, and she caught herself, cheeks flushing slightly. You what? He asked, voice gentler than before. She studied him, truly taking in the changes. He stood taller, his features more defined, less boyish. But it was his eyes that had changed most, still that familiar blue, but deeper somehow, containing knowledge that hadn't been there before. I was worried, she admitted quietly. You've never just disappeared like that, not without telling someone. Naruto's expression softened. He reached out, briefly touching her shoulder. Where their skin connected, she felt an unusual warmth, a vibration of energy that sent goosebumps down her arm. I'm sorry for worrying you, he said sincerely. But I needed to understand what was happening to me before I returned. It would have been dangerous otherwise. The gravity in his voice gave her pause. This wasn't the Naruto who made reckless promises or rushed headlong into danger. Whatever had happened, it had fundamentally changed him. Dangerous how? She asked. Let's get that ramen first, he suggested with a hint of his old smile. I'm starving, and Ichiraku's been calling my name for 3 weeks. News traveled fast in Konoha. By the time Naruto and Sakura reached Ichiraku Ramen, a crowd had gathered, whispering and pointing. Naruto acknowledged them with respectful nods but maintained his focus on his destination. Naruto-kun. Ayame exclaimed when he ducked under the familiar curtains. Dad, look who's back. Tucci emerged from the kitchen, wooden spoon in hand. Well, the prodigal customer returns. And looking like a proper shinobi now, I see. Naruto settled onto his usual stool, Sakura taking the one beside him. The usual, please. Double portion. Coming right up. Tucci disappeared back into the kitchen, but not before giving Naruto an appraising look that suggested he, too, sensed something different. So, Sakura began when they were relatively alone. Are you going to give me a preview of this long story, or do I have to wait with everyone else? Naruto considered her for a moment. What do you know about the Otsutsuki clan? Just what was in the classified reports after the war. Kagaya was their princess, sent to harvest chakra from our world. Supposedly, she went rogue and decided to keep the power for herself. That's the simplified version, Naruto confirmed. The truth is more complex. The Otsutsuki are interdimensional chakra harvesters. They plant divine trees on worlds rich with life, nurture them until they bear chakra fruit, then consume the fruit to evolve their own power while leaving the world a husk. Sakura's expression turned grim. And one of them gave you, whatever that is on your arm? The karma, yes. It's their method of cheating death, a complete backup of themselves, designed to slowly transform the vessel into a new version of the original. Her medical mind immediately grasped the implications. That's horrific. Are you saying you're turning into one of them? No, Naruto said firmly. That was the intention, but something interfered. Instead of replacing me, the data is integrating with me. I'm gaining abilities, knowledge, even some memories, but I remain myself. Before Sakura could press further, 2 large bowls of ramen arrived, steam rising invitingly from the broth. Naruto broke his chopsticks apart with practiced ease. Thank you, Tucci-san. It smells amazing. As he began eating more carefully than the Naruto of old would have, Sakura noticed something else different. His awareness never wavered. Despite appearing focused on his meal, his eyes tracked every movement around them. The Chunin passing by outside, the civilian child peeking curiously through the curtains, the Anbu hidden on the rooftop across the street. You can sense all of them, can't you? She asked quietly. Naruto nodded, not pausing his eating. The karma enhances sensory abilities beyond anything I've experienced before. I can feel chakra signatures from across the village. Distinguish emotions. Even predict movement patterns. Is that how you knew I was coming to Tsunade's office? He smiled. That, and you're predictable when you're worried about your teammates. She bristled slightly, then relaxed when she realized he was teasing her. This, at least, felt like the old Naruto. What about the 9 tails? Has this affected your relationship with it? Kurama, Naruto corrected again. And yes, we've reached a new understanding. The threat the Otsutsuki represent concerns him as much as us. He's been surprisingly helpful. As if responding to the mention, the whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks darkened momentarily, accompanied by a brief fluctuation in his chakra that even civilians nearby seemed to notice, pausing in their activities. Sorry, Naruto said, Noticing her concerned expression, he has opinions about being discussed. Sakura couldn't help but laugh, a sound of genuine amusement that drew curious glances. So some things haven't changed. More has stayed the same than you might think, he replied, finishing his first bowl and starting on the second. My goals. My bonds. His eyes met hers. My precious people. Something in his gaze made her breath catch. There was an intensity there that hadn't existed before, or perhaps had always existed but been buried beneath youthful exuberance. Naruto. Before she could continue, a familiar chakra signature approached. Naruto turned slightly, facing the street before the arrival became visible. Kakashi-sensei is coming, he remarked casually, and he's bringing company. Moments later, Kakashi Hitaki appeared beside their table, visible eye crinkled in what might have been a smile beneath his mask. Behind him stood Sai, expression carefully neutral as always. My missing student returns, Kakashi said lightly, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his concern. With new fashion sense and, apparently, sensory abilities that detected us before we rounded the corner. Naruto stood, bowing respectfully to his teacher, another new behavior that didn't go unnoticed. Sensei. Sai. I apologize for my absence. Kakashi hummed noncommittally. I suppose we'll hear all about it at this meeting Tsunade-sama is arranging? His gaze flicked to the markings visible on Naruto's hand. Those appear remarkably similar to certain forbidden sealing techniques. Similar, but fundamentally different, Naruto replied. More advanced and more dangerous. Sai stepped forward, dark eyes assessing. Your chakra has changed. It's denser, more refined. He tilted his head, yet still recognizably yours. Naruto nodded appreciation for the observation. Well put. A moment of silence fell between the reunited team members, broken only by the sounds of the busy street beyond. Well, Kakashi finally said, since we have an hour before this meeting, perhaps you could demonstrate some of these new abilities. Training Ground 7 should be empty. Naruto's lips curved into a genuine smile, the first that truly reached his eyes since his return. I thought you'd never ask. Training Ground 7 had always been a second home to Team 7, the place where they had first become genin under Kakashi's tutelage. Now, as the four shinobi stood in the familiar clearing, the nostalgic atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Ground rules? Naruto asked, removing his white haori and folding it carefully before placing it on a nearby stump. Kakashi pushed up his headband, revealing his Sharingan. Don't hold back. I want to see what we're dealing with. Are you sure about that? Naruto's tone carried no arrogance, only concern. Quite sure, Kakashi replied, taking a ready stance. Sakura, Sai, you two observe for now. Join in only if necessary. They nodded, moving to the perimeter as Naruto and Kakashi faced each other across the training ground. Begin whenever you're. Kakashi started, then stopped abruptly as his Sharingan tracked a blur of movement. Naruto had closed the 20-meter gap between them in an instant, standing calmly beside his former teacher. He hadn't attacked, merely demonstrated speed that surpassed even Kakashi's enhanced visual tracking. That's not the body flicker technique, Kakashi observed, maintaining his composure despite his surprise. There was no chakra buildup. No, Naruto confirmed, stepping back to give Kakashi space. It's called spatial translation, direct manipulation of space-time coordinates without hand signs or preparation. From the sidelines, Sakura gasped. Like the fourth Hokage's flying thunder god technique, but without seals? Similar principle, different execution, Naruto explained. Now, shall we continue? Without waiting for a response, he formed a single hand sign one Kakashi didn't recognize. The air around Naruto shimmered as pure chakra began to manifest, not in the familiar blue of normal techniques or even the red of the nine tails, but in a brilliant gold tinged with blue at its edges. This is the base form of karma-enhanced chakra, Naruto explained as the energy coalesced around him. It allows for techniques that would normally be impossible due to chakra-type limitations. To demonstrate, he extended his hand. A perfect sphere of water formed above his palm, then transformed into a swirling vortex of fire, then crystallized into earth, before finally dispersing into wind, all without additional hand signs. Perfect chakra nature transformation and combination without seals, Kakashi murmured, Sharingan recording everything. Impressive, but let's see how it holds up in combat. Without warning, Kakashi launched forward, hands blurring through signs before releasing a massive fireball directly at Naruto. The flames engulfed the spot where Naruto stood, but Kakashi wasn't surprised when they dispelled to reveal empty space. "Behind you," Naruto's voice came, followed by a light tap on Kakashi's shoulder. The Jonin spun, lightning crackling along his arm as he unleashed Chidori with lethal precision only for his hand to pass through what appeared to be an afterimage of Naruto. Above, Kakashi looked up to see Naruto hovering 10 meters in the air, defying gravity without visible means. "Flight 2. Sai called out, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Without wings or visible chakra expenditure?" "Gravitational manipulation," Naruto corrected, descending slowly. "Useful for more than just flight." To demonstrate, he gestured toward a large boulder at the edge of the training ground. It shuddered, then lifted effortlessly into the air before splitting perfectly into cubic sections that began orbiting around Naruto like satellites. "Enough showing off," Kakashi said, though there was no real reproach in his voice. "Let's see how you handle this." The copy ninja's hands flashed through a complex sequence, and the ground beneath Naruto erupted with earth spikes while simultaneously, 3 water dragons formed from a nearby stream lunged toward him from different angles. What happened next left even Sakura, who had seen Naruto pull off countless impossible feats, stunned. The black markings on Naruto's arm expanded, crawling across his chest and up the side of his face in geometric patterns. His right eye transformed, sclera darkening to black while the iris shifted to a brilliant blue with a pattern reminiscent of a compass rose. He raised his hand, and a ripple of invisible force expanded outward, disintegrating the earth spikes and dispersing the water dragons into harmless droplets. The pulse didn't stop there. It lifted small rocks and bent grass in a perfect circle around Naruto before dissipating at precisely the line where his teammates stood. Perfect control. "That's enough," Kakashi called, lowering his hands. "I've seen what I needed to see." The markings receded from Naruto's face, his eye returning to normal as he relaxed his stance. "That was maybe 10% of what I can access currently," he admitted quietly, "and I'm still learning." Sakura approached, medical instincts overriding her awe. "Your chakra network should be strained after manipulating energy like that, but it's adapting, strengthening even as you use it?" Naruto nodded. "The karma doesn't just provide power, it evolves the vessel to handle increasing amounts of it. My chakra coils are approximately 3 times denser than they were before, and still developing." "Fascinating," Sai remarked, sketching rapidly in a small notebook he'd produced. "And concerning. Such power would make you a primary target for any number of organizations." "It already has," Naruto replied grimly. "Which is why we need to prepare. The Otsutsuki who gave me this karma wasn't acting alone, and his partner will come looking eventually. Not just for me, but for what they originally came to harvest, the chakra of every living thing on this planet." A heavy silence fell over the training ground as the implications sank in. "Well," Kakashi finally said, pulling his headband back down over his Sharingan, "it seems we have quite a bit to discuss at this meeting." The Hokage's office had been expanded with a space-time ninjutsu to accommodate the assembled group. Present were the Jonin Council, Team 7, and several clan heads who had insisted on attending once word spread of Naruto's return and transformation. Tsunade sat behind her desk, fingers steepled as Naruto concluded his explanation of the Otsutsuki threat and the nature of his karma seal. The room remained silent for several moments after he finished, each person processing the implications in their own way. "So," Shikaku Nara finally spoke, "you're telling us that godlike aliens have been harvesting chakra from worlds for millennia. Kaguya was one of them who went rogue, and now her clan members are coming to finish what she started, beginning with retrieving this karma from you." "That's the simplified version, yes," Naruto confirmed. "And we're supposed to believe you gained all this knowledge and power in 3 weeks? Hiyashi Hyuga's pale eyes narrowed with skepticism. "The karma contains compressed data equivalent to thousands of years of experience," Naruto explained patiently. "It's designed to rapidly prepare a vessel for Otsutsuki possession. In my case, Kurama's presence created a unique situation where I can access the knowledge without losing myself." "Convenient," Danzo Shimura remarked from his corner of the room, lone visible eye fixed calculatingly on Naruto. Naruto met his gaze steadily. "Not convenient, Lord Shimura. Fortunate. Had the process continued as intended, I would no longer be Naruto Uzumaki." I would be Urashiki Otsutsuki wearing my face, with full access to the 9 tails and all my original abilities. A chill passed through the room at the thought. You mentioned others will come looking for you, Tsunade redirected. When? I'm not certain, Naruto admitted. Otsutsuki operate on a different temporal scale than we do. It could be weeks or months. But they will come. The karma acts as a beacon to them. Then perhaps we should focus on removing it, Inoichi Yamanaka suggested. Our clan has techniques that might. Removal is impossible, Naruto cut in. The karma has already integrated with my genetic structure at a cellular level. Attempting to remove it would be fatal. Then what do you propose? Tsunade asked, leaning forward. Naruto straightened, his presence somehow filling the room despite his youth compared to many present. First, we prepare. The knowledge I've gained includes Otsutsuki weaknesses and fighting techniques. I can train elite shinobi in methods specifically designed to counter them. He turned slightly, addressing the broader group. Second, we need to establish a detection network. I can provide specifications for sensors that will detect dimensional rifts before they fully form, giving us advance warning of arrival. And third, he continued, we need to strengthen existing alliances. This threat isn't just to Konoha but to all shinobi nations. The Otsutsuki won't distinguish between our borders when they harvest chakra. His proposal was met with murmurs, some agreeing, others doubtful. Bold plans from someone who until recently was still considered a genin, Danzo observed coldly. Kakashi spoke up from where he leaned against the wall. After what I witnessed today, I believe Naruto's current combat capabilities exceed most, if not all, shinobi in this room, including myself. Coming from the famously modest copy ninja, this statement silenced much of the skepticism. I don't ask to lead, Naruto clarified, only to contribute the knowledge I've gained. Lady Tsunade remains our Hokage, and I will follow her directives. Tsunade studied him for a long moment before nodding. Very well. We'll implement your recommendations, starting with the training program. Select Jonin will be assigned to learn these counter techniques. She glanced around the room. This information remains classified. Dismissed except for Team 7 and the clan heads. As the room cleared, Naruto felt a presence approaching the tower, familiar, yet tinged with something new. Moments later, a knock came at the door. Enter, Tsunade called. Ino Yamanaka stepped into the room, her usual confident demeanor tempered with uncharacteristic hesitation as her eyes found Naruto. You requested my presence, Lady Hokage? She asked, though her gaze remained fixed on Naruto. Yes, Tsunade confirmed. Given your expertise in mind techniques, you'll be working directly with Naruto to develop protocols for protecting our shinobi against Otsutsuki mental infiltration. Ino nodded, finally tearing her eyes away from Naruto to address Tsunade. Of course, Lady Hokage. Good. You two can start immediately. Use Training Ground 3, it has the privacy seals already in place. As the meeting concluded and people began filing out, Ino approached Naruto. Up close, she studied the changes in him with professional intensity that didn't quite mask her personal interest. So, she said, voice lower than necessary, you've got ancient alien knowledge locked in that head of yours now? Naruto smiled, a genuine expression that softened his new, more mature features. Something like that. Well, she replied with a hint of her usual confidence returning, my family specializes in navigating minds. Even freakishly complicated ones. I'm counting on it, he said, matching her tone. The brief exchange wasn't lost on Sakura, who frowned slightly from across the room. As they prepared to leave, Naruto suddenly stiffened, his attention snapping to the window. Everyone in the room noticed the change in his demeanor. What is it? Tsunade demanded. A dimensional disturbance, Naruto said quietly. Small, just at the edge of my sensing range about 10 kilometers south of the village. Otsutsuki? Kakashi asked, immediately alert. No, Naruto replied after a moment of concentration. Different signature, but definitely not natural. Tsunade didn't hesitate. Kakashi, take Team 7 and investigate. Approach with caution. If it's hostile, do not engage without confirmation from me. Understood. Kakashi nodded. Team 7, move out. As they prepared to depart, Naruto caught Hinata's eye where she stood beside her father. Something passed between them, an unspoken question and answer before he turned to follow his team. The hunt had begun sooner than expected. The forest south of Konoha grew denser and older the further one traveled from the village. Team 7 moved through the canopy with practiced efficiency, Naruto taking point despite the unusual dynamic this created with Kakashi. 2 kilometers ahead, Naruto reported, the karma patterns partially visible along his neck as he enhanced his sensing abilities. The disturbance is stabilizing, not expanding. Whatever it is, it's maintaining a fixed position. Any chakra signatures? Kakashi asked. 1. Powerful, but unstable. Fluctuating in a way I haven't encountered before. Sakura moved closer to Naruto's position. Is it dangerous? Uncertain, he replied. But definitely not Otsutsuki. Their chakra has a distinct resonance. This is something else entirely. They slowed as they approached the coordinates, taking positions surrounding a small clearing where the air itself seemed to shimmer with distortion. At its center stood a figure dressed in unfamiliar armor, a woman with pale blue skin and white hair pulled into a severe topknot. We're being observed, she announced without turning, her voice carrying a metallic undertone. 4 signatures. 3 standard human variant chakra patterns, 1. Anomalous. Now she turned, eyes the color of burnished gold scanning the trees until they locked onto Naruto's position. You carry the embedded karma. How interesting. Naruto stepped into the clearing, signaling for his teammates to remain hidden for now. You know of the karma? Of course, she replied, examining him with clinical detachment. Though yours has been modified from standard deployment protocols, most unusual. Who are you? Naruto asked, maintaining a respectful distance. You're not Otsutsuki. Correct. I am Sentinel Vox, Scout Class, she responded matter-of-factly. I monitor dimensional anomalies across the multiverse. Your world has recently registered several concerning fluctuations. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Because of the karma. Partially, but primarily due to recent Otsutsuki activities. They've been unusually active in this dimensional cluster. Her head tilted, eyes scanning him more intensely. You've repurposed a karma implantation without succumbing to personality override. This should be impossible. And yet here I stand, Naruto replied evenly. What do you want from our world, Sentinel Vox? She circled him slowly, the strange armor she wore occasionally catching the filtered sunlight in ways that bent and distorted it. Not extraction or conquest, if that's your concern. My kind observes and occasionally intervenes when interdimensional predators like the Otsutsuki threaten ecosystem stability. Naruto felt his teammates' tension from their hidden positions. Kakashi was positioned to strike if necessary. Sakura had gathered chakra to her fists, and Sai's ink creatures were poised around the perimeter. They'll be coming for me, Naruto stated. The partner of the one who gave me this karma. Yes, Vox confirmed. Momoshiki. Far more dangerous than Urashiki, whose essence you now carry. He travels with his subordinate, Kinshiki. She stopped her circling, facing Naruto directly. They will arrive within 37 of your days. The precision of the timeline sent a chill through Naruto. How can you be certain? I track dimensional transit signatures. They've already initiated the approach sequence. Her golden eyes flicked toward where Kakashi was hidden. Your companions can join us. I mean no harm to your world. Slowly, the rest of Team 7 emerged from their positions, maintaining combat readiness despite the apparent peace offering. 37 days isn't much time to prepare for beings of their power, Kakashi noted, visible eyes studying the mysterious visitor. No, Vox agreed. It is not. Which is why I am authorized to provide limited tactical assistance. She raised her hand, and a small crystalline object materialized above her palm, a dodecahedron that rotated slowly, emitting soft pulses of light. This is a dimensional anchor, she explained. It will force Momoshiki and Kinshiki to materialize at a location of your choosing, rather than allowing them to select their arrival point strategically. Additionally, it will temporarily dampen their ability to absorb chakra-based attacks for approximately 3 minutes after arrival. Naruto studied the device, the karma on his arm resonating subtly with. As Naruto studied the device, the karma on his arm resonated subtly with it, geometric patterns pulsing in sync with the dodecahedron's light. Why help us? He asked, eyes never leaving the crystalline object. What do the Sentinels gain from interfering with Otsutsuki harvesting? Vox's expression remained neutral, but something like approval flickered in her golden eyes. Intelligent question. The Otsutsuki are interdimensional parasites who consume and move on. Their practices have already rendered 17-dimensional clusters uninhabitable to all life forms. They upset the balance. And you care about balance? Sakura interjected skeptically. Balance ensures continuity, Vox replied simply. The multiverse self-regulates when possible. We intervene only when necessary. Her attention returned to Naruto. Your existence a successfully integrated karma host who maintains autonomy is unprecedented. It suggests this dimension has adaptive potential the Otsutsuki did not anticipate. The device floated from her hand to hover before Naruto. Take it. When activated, it will draw Momoshiki and Kinshiki to its location. Choose wisely where you establish the anchor. Naruto reached out, fingers closing around the crystal. The moment he touched it, information flooded his mind activation sequences, calibration methods, strategic deployment considerations as if the device itself were downloading directly into his consciousness. I understand, he murmured, securing the device in a specialized pocket of his combat suit. Vox nodded once, then turned as if to leave. One final warning, Karma Bearer, the device will only function once. And Momoshiki is not like Urashiki. He is a main family member, far stronger and more cunning. Do not underestimate him. Wait, Kakashi called. How do we contact you if you don't? Vox interrupted. Our protocols forbid direct intervention in combat. This assistance already stretches the boundaries of permitted interaction. The air around her began to shimmer and distort. 37 days, Karma Bearer. Use them well. With that, she stepped backward into what appeared to be a tear in reality itself, the distortion sealing behind her with a sound like crystal breaking. The clearing fell silent, disturbed only by a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves overhead. Well, Sai remarked after a moment, that was informative. And concerning, Kakashi added, turning to Naruto, you believe her? Naruto nodded, his expression grave. The karma contains fragmented memories of sentinels. Urashiki feared them, considered them dangerous meddlers who occasionally thwarted Otsutsuki harvesting operations. He tucked the device more securely away. If she says Momoshiki is coming in 37 days, then he's coming in 37 days. We need to report this to Lady Tsunade immediately, Sakura said, already moving back toward the village. Agreed, Kakashi replied, falling into step beside her. Naruto, any insights on where we should establish this anchor? Preferably somewhere uninhabited but accessible. Naruto considered this as they traveled, the weight of the device and the responsibility it represented heavy in his pocket. The Valley of the End, he finally said. Remote enough to minimize civilian casualties, but close enough that we can deploy forces quickly. The natural terrain provides tactical advantages, and the surrounding cliffs will help contain the battle. Kakashi nodded his approval. Sound reasoning. We'll recommend it to Tsunade-sama. As they neared the village, Naruto sensed a familiar presence waiting by the gates. Hinata stood with perfect posture, hands clasped before her, lavender eyes scanning the forest's edge. The moment she spotted them, her expression brightened, though she maintained her composed demeanor. I'll catch up, Naruto told his teammates. There's something I need to discuss with Hinata. Sakura frowned slightly but nodded. Don't be long. This report can't wait. When the others had continued toward the Hokage Tower, Naruto approached Hinata, who hadn't moved from her position. You sensed the disturbance, he stated, not a question. She nodded. Not as precisely as you could, but yes. My Byakugan detected an unusual chakra signature unlike anything I've encountered. Her perceptive gaze studied him. You've learned something troubling. We have 37 days before extremely powerful enemies arrive, he confirmed, appreciating her directness. The stuttering, hesitant Hinata of years past had been replaced by a confident young woman who maintained her gentleness without sacrificing strength. Then we should prepare, she said simply. How can I help? Something in her immediate, unhesitating offer touched Naruto deeply. No questions about whether they could win, no doubt in her voice, just steady resolve. Your Byakugan may be crucial, he replied. The Otsutsuki have certain vulnerabilities in their chakra network that standard sensing techniques can't detect. But your eyes might. She nodded, determination evident in her stance. I'll train to identify them. Will you show me what to look for? I will, he promised. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he added, there's something else. The karma contains knowledge of techniques that might enhance the Byakugan beyond its current limitations. If you're willing, we could explore that together. Interest flickered in her pale eyes. Like the Tensagen that appears in some of our clan's ancient texts? Naruto blinked in surprise. You know of it? Only legends, she admitted. Our family archives mention it as a theoretical evolution of the Byakugan, but no Hyuga has achieved it in recorded history. The legends are real, Naruto confirmed, and with the right training, you might be capable of awakening it. Determination set her features. Then let's begin as soon as possible. Naruto smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Tomorrow morning. Training Ground 11. It has the privacy seals we'll need. He hesitated, then added, and Hinata. Thank you for believing in me. Even with all these changes. A soft blush colored her cheeks, but her gaze remained steady. The core of who you are hasn't changed, Naruto-kun. Your heart is still the same. That's what matters most. With a respectful bow, she turned to leave, her graceful movements betraying her rigorous training. Naruto watched her go, a curious warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the karma's power. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Tsunade had immediately enacted a village-wide training protocol upon hearing of the 37-day deadline. Elite Jonin were briefed on the Otsutsuki threat, Anbu patrols doubled, and emergency evacuation plans were established for civilians. Naruto divided his time between multiple responsibilities. Mornings were spent with Kakashi and selected Jonin, teaching them specialized techniques to counter Otsutsuki abilities. Afternoons found him working with Ino on developing mental shielding protocols that could protect shinobi from psychic attacks, and evenings. Evenings belonged to Hinata. Training Ground 11 was secluded, surrounded by dense forest and protected by privacy seals originally designed for Anbu operations. Here, Naruto guided Hinata through exercises designed to evolve her Byakugan toward its ultimate form. Focus on the center point between your eyes, he instructed, sitting cross-legged across from her in the small clearing. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples above them. The Tensagen activates from a different chakra convergence than the standard Byakugan. Hinata, eyes closed in concentration, nodded slightly. The veins around her eyes were pronounced as she channeled chakra precisely according to his guidance. Now, imagine your visual field expanding not just outward, but inward, seeing into the nature of chakra itself, its structure and potential. Naruto's voice was calm, measured. The Tensagen doesn't just see chakra networks. It perceives the fundamental building blocks of chakra and how they can be rearranged. As he spoke, he extended his hand, palm facing upward. A small sphere of golden blue energy formed above it, a visual aid to match his description. Feel that energy, he continued. Not with your eyes, but with your chakra. Let your own energy resonate with it. Hinata's brow furrowed slightly in concentration. Slowly, her own hand raised, mirroring his position. To Naruto's satisfaction, a faint purple glow began to emanate from her palm, unformed and unstable, but definitely responding. Good, he encouraged. That's excellent progress for just our 3rd session. Hinata opened her eyes, the Byakugan active and somehow different. The pupils seemed to contain a hint of blue that hadn't been there before. I felt something, she said quietly, like seeing a color I've never experienced before. Naruto nodded. The beginning stages of the transformation. Your chakra is adapting to the possibility. He allowed his own energy sphere to dissipate. That's enough for today. Pushing too hard too quickly could damage your chakra network. As they gathered their things to leave, Hinata paused, studying him with her still active Byakugan. Your chakra has changed again, she observed. It's expanding. The karma is spreading internally, isn't it? Naruto didn't bother denying it, her eyes saw too clearly. Yes. The integration process continues to advance. Does it hurt? The question was simple but asked with such genuine concern that it caught him off guard. Sometimes, he admitted, something about her presence making honesty feel natural. Mostly at night. The cellular restructuring accelerates during rest periods. Without hesitation, she stepped closer, raising her hand to hover near his arm where the visible markings ended. My family has techniques for pain management during chakra network reconstruction. If you'd allow me. Naruto nodded, curious and touched by the offer. Her fingers pressed gently against specific points along his arm, channeling precise amounts of chakra into each. The effect was immediate, a cooling sensation that spread through his body, easing an ache he'd grown so accustomed to he barely noticed it anymore. He breathed, genuinely surprised at the relief. Thank you. Hinata smiled, the expression transforming her serious features. It's temporary, maybe 12 hours of relief. But I could show you the pressure points so you can do it yourself. I'd appreciate that, he replied sincerely. As they walked back toward the village together, a comfortable silence between them, Naruto found himself appreciating how different Hinata's presence felt compared to his other interactions since returning. With others, even his closest teammates, there was always an undercurrent of wariness, of adjustment to his transformed state. With Hinata, there was simply acceptance and a steadiness that felt reassuring. 34 days left, she said quietly as they reached the point where their paths would diverge. 34 days, he agreed, but we'll be ready. Her confidence matched his own as she nodded farewell and turned toward the Hyuga compound. Watching her go, Naruto felt the karma pulse along his arm, not painfully as usual, but almost contentedly. Interesting. The following morning found Naruto in an unexpected location, Yamanaka Flowers, the shop run by Ino's family. He'd received a message requesting he meet her there rather than their usual training ground. The bell chimed softly as he entered, the rich scents of dozens of blooms filling the air. Just a moment, Ino's voice called from the back room. Naruto waited patiently, examining the elaborate floral arrangements with newfound appreciation. The karma contained Urashiki's memories of countless worlds, many with plant life unlike anything on Earth. Yet there was something uniquely beautiful about these familiar flowers. Sorry to keep you waiting, Ino said, emerging from the back with a spray of cosmos flowers in her arms. She stopped short when she saw him, a smile spreading across her face. Well, don't you look different today? Naruto glanced down at himself, puzzled. He wore his standard black combat suit with orange accents, though he'd left the white haori behind. Different how? Relaxed, she replied, setting the flowers in a display vase. Less like you're carrying the weight of an alien invasion on your shoulders. It's a good look on you. Her blue eyes sparkled with teasing warmth. I had a good training session yesterday, he admitted. And Hinata showed me a technique for managing the karma's physical effects. Something flickered briefly across Ino's expression, too quickly to identify before her smile returned. Hinata, huh? Always the quiet ones you need to watch out for. She wiped her hands on her apron. Anyway, I asked you to meet me here because I had an insight about our mental shielding project. She led him to a back room filled with plants at various stages of growth. Unlike the shop's decorative flowers, these were specialized varieties used in Yamanaka clan techniques, plants with psychoactive properties that enhanced their mind-based jutsu. I've been thinking about how the Otsutsuki mental infiltration works, she explained, gesturing to a workbench covered with botanical extracts and scrolls. Based on what you've described, they use a combination of chakra-based suggestion and direct neural interference. That's correct, Naruto confirmed, impressed by her analysis. They align their chakra frequency to the targets and then introduce disruptive patterns. Right. So I've been experimenting with these. She held up a small vial of golden liquid, essence of mind shield orchids, combined with chakra-infused neural stabilizers. In theory, they should create a temporary frequency barrier around a shinobi's consciousness. Naruto took the vial, examining it closely. This is brilliant, Ino. It's still theoretical, she cautioned, though she couldn't hide her pleasure at his praise. We need to test it. On me, Naruto concluded, understanding immediately. She nodded. You're the only one with enough knowledge of Otsutsuki mental techniques to simulate an attack accurately. Logical, he agreed. When do you want to try? No time like the present, she replied, gesturing to two prepared meditation cushions in the corner of the room. I've already set up a containment field in case things go sideways. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You were confident I'd agree. She grinned, unrepentant. I figured saving the world was on your to-do list today anyway. Taking their positions on the cushions, Ino administered a few drops of the golden liquid to each of them. The effect was subtle, a slight cooling sensation behind the eyes, followed by a sharpening of visual clarity. I'll establish a mind link first, Ino explained, hands forming her family's distinctive seal. Then you'll attempt to penetrate my mental defenses using an Otsutsuki technique. Nothing too aggressive for the first test. Naruto nodded, allowing the karma markings to spread across his arm as he prepared to access the necessary knowledge. Ready when you are. Mind transmission technique, Ino whispered, her consciousness suddenly connected to his. The experience was unlike any mind link Naruto had experienced before. Ino's mental presence was organized, disciplined, a space of crystalline clarity with well-defined boundaries. Her mind reflected her personality. Vibrant yet precisely controlled, with depths carefully guarded beneath the surface presentation. Impressive mental architecture, Naruto communicated through the link. Years of training, she replied, her mental voice carrying the same confident tone as her physical one. Now, show me what I'm up against. Naruto focused, drawing on Urashiki's knowledge of mental infiltration. He constructed a gentle probe, a tendril of influence designed to bypass conscious defenses and implant a simple suggestion. In this case, nothing harmful. Just an urge to stand up and touch her left ear. The moment he released the probe toward her mental barriers, he felt the resistance, not a solid wall, but something more sophisticated. The golden serum had created a frequency filter that recognized the alien pattern of his influence and began to dissolve it. I can feel it, Ino's mental voice came, excited but focused. Like something trying to pass through a sieve that's catching all the important parts. The probe dissipated completely before reaching her core consciousness. Successful defense, Naruto confirmed, genuinely impressed. Let me try something stronger. This time, he constructed a more complex infiltration, a multi-layered approach that Urashiki's memories indicated would be effective against even trained mental defenders. He wove chakra patterns designed to mimic Ino's own thought structures while carrying hidden commands beneath. Again, the golden barrier identified and neutralized the attempt, though not as quickly or completely. A faint echo of his suggestion reached her, but without the compelling force behind it. I felt that one, she acknowledged. Like hearing someone whispering from another room, perceptible but not influential. They continued testing with increasingly sophisticated techniques, Ino adjusting the formula slightly between attempts based on the results. After nearly an hour of mental sparring, they finally disengaged, both slightly winded from the concentration required. This is promising, Naruto said as they returned fully to physical awareness. With refinement, it could provide significant protection for our forces. Ino tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, eyes bright with accomplishment. The formula needs adjustment. It started breaking down against your stronger attempts. But the concept is sound. How quickly can you produce it at scale? That's the challenging part, she admitted. Some of these ingredients are rare. For a village-wide deployment, we'd need at least 3 weeks of intensive cultivation and processing. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Focus on enough for the frontline fighters first. I'll speak with Tsunade about allocating resources to help with production. As they gathered their notes and prepared to leave, Ino paused, studying him with unexpected intensity. Can I ask you something personal, Naruto? Of course. The karma, does it change how you feel about people, your connections to them? The question caught him off guard. No, he answered after considering it. My feelings toward others remain my own. The karma contains Urashiki's knowledge and abilities, but not his emotional connections or loyalties. Good, she said simply. Then, with casual grace that belied the deliberateness of the action, she leaned forward and placed a light kiss on his cheek. Because some of us were worried we might lose the Naruto we've always known. The one who cares so deeply about his precious people. Before he could respond, she turned away, gathering the remaining vials. I'll have an updated formula ready to test tomorrow. Same time? Same time, he agreed, aware of a curious warmth spreading from where her lips had touched his skin. As he left the flower shop, stepping into the bright morning sunlight, Naruto found himself reflecting on Ino's question. The karma had changed him physically, intellectually, even in how others perceived him. But his core, the essential connections and values that made him Naruto Uzumaki, remained steadfast. That, he realized, might be his greatest strength in the coming battle. The days continued to count down with increasing urgency. 29 days before the predicted arrival, Tsunade called an emergency meeting of the Allied Shinobi Forces leadership. Representatives from each of the 5 great nations gathered in Konoha's secure council chambers. Naruto stood before them, the karma markings visible along his neck and hand as he concluded his briefing on the Otsutsuki threat. The room remained silent for several moments as the gravity of the situation sank in. Let me be clear, the Raikage, finally spoke, his massive arms crossed over his chest. You expect us to commit our forces based on information you received from an alien parasite that's currently inhabiting your body and a mysterious sentinel none of us have ever encountered? I understand your skepticism, Naruto replied calmly. But consider the evidence. The techniques I've demonstrated. The detailed knowledge of Otsutsuki capabilities that aligns with what we learned during the Fourth Shinobi War about Kagaya. And most importantly, the dimensional anchor provided by the sentinel, which I've allowed your sensor nin to examine. The anchor is indeed unlike any technology or jutsu we've encountered, Gaara, the Kazekage, confirmed. His pale green eyes studied Naruto thoughtfully. And there's no denying that Uzumaki's capabilities have evolved in ways that correspond with his explanation. The question isn't whether the threat is real, Mei Terumi, the Mizukage, interjected. It's whether we can defeat it. These Otsutsuki sound at least as powerful as Kagaya, who required the combined might of all our forces plus Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto to barely contain. At the mention of Sasuke, a brief silence fell over the room. The last Uchiha had been absent from the village for months on a classified mission. Attempts to recall him had thus far proven unsuccessful. We are stronger now than we were then, Naruto stated confidently. And we have advanced warning, strategic intelligence on their capabilities, and a plan that gives us tactical advantages. He stepped forward, activating a three-dimensional map of the Valley of the End in the center of the room. If we position our forces here, and here, he indicated with precise gestures, we can engage them the moment they arrive through the dimensional anchor. The initial dampening effect will give us a 3-minute window to inflict maximum damage before they can fully utilize their chakra absorption abilities. The various Kage and their advisors leaned forward, studying the battle plan with professional interest. Despite their skepticism, none could deny the strategic soundness of the approach. What about civilians? Onoki, the elderly Tsuchikage, asked. If these beings can absorb chakra on a planetary scale, how do we protect the general population? The Yamanaka clan is developing a protective serum, Tsunade answered. It won't stop physical attacks, but it should provide mental shielding against Otsutsuki influence techniques. We're already producing it for distribution to critical personnel. And, Naruto added, we've designed evacuation protocols for civilians within a 100-kilometer radius of the anticipated arrival point. Beyond that, our best protection is to neutralize the threat quickly. The discussion continued for hours, with each Kage raising concerns and Naruto or Tsunade addressing them with increasing detail. Finally, as evening approached, Gaara stood. Suna stands with Konoha, he declared formally. We will commit our forces as requested. One by one, the other Kage followed suit, some more reluctantly than others, but all ultimately recognizing the necessity of unified action. As the meeting concluded and the representatives prepared to return to their villages to mobilize their forces, the Raikage approached Naruto directly. Uzumaki, he said, his imposing figure towering over even Naruto's improved height. If we're committing to this fight based on your intelligence, you better be right. Naruto met his gaze steadily. I am, Raikage-sama. And I'll be fighting alongside your forces on the front line. Studied him for a moment longer before nodding, once a gesture of qualified respect. See that you do. As the foreign dignitaries departed, Tsunade gestured for Naruto to join her on the Hokage Tower's balcony overlooking the village. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across Konoha's streets and buildings. 29 days, she murmured, leaning against the railing. Hardly seems enough time. It will have to be, Naruto replied, standing beside her. Every day, the karma integrates more completely. I gain access to more of Urashiki's knowledge and abilities. Tsunade turned to study him, medical expertise evident in her assessing gaze. And the cost? Don't think I haven't noticed the strain it's putting on your body. Sakura's reports indicate your cellular structure is undergoing constant renovation. A necessary adaptation, he acknowledged, but one I can manage. With Hinata's help, I hear, Tsunade remarked with a raised eyebrow. Naruto didn't bother asking how she knew. Her gentle fist techniques are remarkably effective at moderating the integration process, yes. A knowing smile touched Tsunade's lips. And I suppose your regular evening training sessions with her are purely professional? For the first time in their conversation, Naruto's composure slipped slightly, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. She's making extraordinary progress with the Tenseigan development. Her insights have been invaluable. Tsunade hummed noncommittally. And Ino's frequent consultations on mental shielding techniques? Also purely professional? Naruto raised an eyebrow. Is there a point to these questions, Lady Hokage? Tsunade's expression softened, becoming almost maternal. Just making sure that with all this new power and responsibility, you haven't forgotten to live, Naruto. The world needs saving, yes. But don't lose sight of what makes it worth saving. Before he could respond, a messenger appeared in a swirl of leaves, kneeling respectfully. Lady Hokage, Uzumaki-san. We've received word from the border patrol. Sasuke Uchiha has been located and is returning to the village. Estimated arrival, tomorrow morning. Tsunade nodded. Excellent. See that he's brought directly to me upon arrival. As the messenger departed, she turned back to Naruto. Well, that's one problem solved. With the Rinnegan on our side, our chances improve significantly. If he agrees to help, Naruto commented. Sasuke has his own agenda. He will, Tsunade said with certainty, especially once he sees what you've become. Naruto's gaze returned to the village spread out below them, lights beginning to twinkle on as dusk deepened. 29 days, he repeated softly. We'll be ready. The following morning dawned clear and cool, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument, watching the eastern horizon where the sun had just begun to rise. His enhanced senses had detected Sasuke's approach long before conventional lookouts would spot him. Sure enough, within minutes, a solitary figure appeared at the village gates. Even from this distance, Naruto could see the characteristic purple cloak and the distinctive chakra signature that marked his former teammate and rival. Rather than heading to the Hokage Tower as instructed, however, Sasuke altered his course after entering the village. His path changed, leading directly toward the monument where Naruto waited. He sensed me, Naruto murmured to himself, unsurprised. Sasuke's perceptive abilities had always been exceptional. Minutes later, the last Uchiha appeared on the monument, stepping out of a space-time portal with casual ease. He stopped several meters from Naruto, heterochromatic eyes one onyx black, one ringed purple studying him with calculation. When they said you'd change, I assumed it was the usual exaggeration, Sasuke remarked, his deep voice carrying easily across the distance between them. I see now they were understating the case. Welcome back, Sasuke, Naruto replied, turning to face his friend fully. I trust your mission was successful? Interrupted. Sasuke corrected. By urgent messages about alien invaders and you acquiring new powers from something called a karma. His eyes narrowed. Explain. Naruto did, concisely but thoroughly outlining the events of the past weeks, his encounter with Urashiki, the karma's integration, the knowledge it provided, the sentinel's warning, and the approaching threat of Momoshiki and Kinshiki. Throughout the explanation, Sasuke listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When Naruto finished, a silence stretched between them, broken only by the morning breeze. Show me, Sasuke finally said. Understanding the request immediately, Naruto nodded. The black markings of the karma expanded across his skin, crawling up his neck and across the right side of his face. His right eye transformed, sclera darkening while the iris shifted to its brilliant blue pattern. Chakra radiated from him in controlled waves, not the chaotic, emotional energy of his youth or even the golden power of his six-paths sage mode, but something more refined. More precise. The very air around him seemed to bend slightly, reality itself responding to his presence. Sasuke's Rinnegan eye widened fractionally, the closest thing to surprise he ever displayed. Interesting, he said after a moment. It's not just chakra enhancement. Your physical structure has been altered at a fundamental level. Yes, Naruto confirmed, allowing the manifestation to subside. The karma rewrites the vessel on a cellular level to prepare it for Otsutsuki possession. In my case, with Kurama's interference, the process resulted in integration rather than replacement. And you trust this knowledge? These memories that aren't your own? The question was pointed, cutting to the heart of potential concerns. Naruto appreciated his directness. I verify everything against multiple sources when possible, he replied honestly. And I maintain awareness of which thoughts originate from the karma and which are my own. It's similar to how I learned to distinguish between Kurama's influence and my own will. Sasuke studied him a moment longer before nodding once. The Rinnegan confirms your chakra remains fundamentally yours, despite the alterations. It was as close to expressing trust as Sasuke ever came. Will you stand with us against Momoshiki and Kinshiki? Naruto asked directly. They threaten this world, Sasuke replied simply. Of course I'll fight. Relief, subtle but genuine, passed through Naruto. Despite all his new power, he harbored no illusions about the challenge ahead. Having Sasuke's Rinnegan abilities on their side significantly improved their chances. There's more you should know, Naruto added. The sentinel who warned us, she provided a dimensional anchor that will force Momoshiki and Kinshiki to materialize at a location of our choosing. We've selected the Valley of the End. A hint of dark amusement showed in Sasuke's expression. Fitting. The location of our greatest battles, now the site for this one. We have 28 days to prepare, Naruto continued. The allied shinobi forces are mobilizing. Specialized training is underway for Jonin and Anbu, who will form the first response team. Sasuke nodded, then hesitated slightly, an unusual display of uncertainty for him. These Otsutsuki. They're connected to Kagaya? Yes. She was an advanced scout who went rogue, choosing to keep the chakra fruit's power for herself rather than sharing it with the clan as intended. The Otsutsuki have been harvesting worlds for millennia, moving from dimension to dimension like parasites. Something darkened in Sasuke's expression. Which means there could be more beyond these two. Almost certainly, Naruto confirmed grimly. But first, we deal with the immediate threat. The sun had fully risen now, illuminating the village below them. From this vantage point, they could see Konoha awakening people beginning their day, unaware of the cosmic forces converging on their world. We should report to Tsunade, Naruto said after a moment. She's expecting you. Sasuke nodded, turning toward the Hokage tower, but before leaving, he asked one final question so quietly that only Naruto's enhanced hearing caught it. Are you still you, Naruto? The simple inquiry contained layers of meaning, concern, caution, perhaps even a hint of protectiveness that the stoic Uchiha would never openly admit to. Yes, Naruto answered with equal simplicity. Different, but still me, still fighting to protect what matters. Sasuke studied him a moment longer before nodding once acceptance, acknowledgement, perhaps even approval, before stepping back into a space-time portal that would take him directly to the Hokage's office. Left alone atop the monument, Naruto turned his gaze skyward, to the vast blue expanse where, somewhere beyond perception, Momoshiki and Kinshiki were approaching. 28 days to prepare for a battle that would determine the fate of their world. But for the first time since receiving the karma, he felt genuine optimism. They had knowledge, preparation, allies, and now, with Sasuke's return, the two most powerful shinobi in the world united against the common threat. The odds, while still daunting, had shifted in their favor. 2 weeks later, 14 days until the predicted arrival, Training Ground 7 vibrated with concentrated power as Naruto supervised a specialized training session. Arrayed before him were 20 of Konoha's elite Jonin and Anbu, along with select shinobi from allied villages, all hand-picked for the first response team. Again, Naruto instructed, standing calmly at the center of the field. Focus on targeting the specific chakra points I've identified. Standard attacks will be absorbed. You must disrupt their chakra network before they can activate their defensive abilities. The assembled shinobi moved in coordinated patterns, striking at the chakra-constructed simulacrum Naruto had created to mimic an Otsutsuki's network. Some used gentle fist techniques adapted from Hyuga training. Others employed specialized tools designed by the research division based on Naruto's specifications. Hinata and Neji Hyuga led one group, their Byakugan activated as they demonstrated precise strikes to the others. On the opposite side of the field, Kakashi and Sasuke worked with another team on countering absorption techniques with non-chakra-based attacks. Better, Naruto commented as the simulacrum flickered under a particularly well-coordinated assault. But still too slow. Remember, we have a 3-minute window when they first arrive before their full powers activate. Every second counts. As the training continued, he sensed a familiar presence approaching. Sakura walked across the field, her white medical coat fluttering in the breeze. Since Sasuke's return, she had divided her time between developing medical countermeasures with Tsunade and reconnecting with her long-absent teammate, though the latter seemed to yield mixed results, based on the frustrated spikes in her chakra Naruto occasionally detected. Progress report? She asked, coming to stand beside him. Improving, Naruto replied, watching as Neji successfully demonstrated a modified gentle fist strike that temporarily disabled a portion of the simulacrum's network. The Hyuga techniques have been particularly effective once adapted to Otsutsuki physiology. Sakura nodded, her analytical gaze tracking the movements of the shinobi. Tsunade-sama wanted me to inform you that the mental shielding serum production is ahead of schedule. Ino's improvements to the formula allowed us to synthesize it more efficiently. Good news, Naruto acknowledged. How are the preparations at the medical encampment? On track. We've established 3 field hospitals at strategic distances from the Valley of the End, each with specialized trauma teams. She hesitated before adding, I'll be heading the forward unit closest to the battlefield. Naruto turned to her, concern evident in his expression. That position carries significant risk, Sakura. Which is why it needs our best medical ninja, she countered firmly, unless you're suggesting I'm not qualified. Quite the opposite, he replied with a hint of a smile. Your skills are unmatched. I just don't want you in unnecessary danger. Sakura's expression softened slightly. This coming from the man who plans to face 2 godlike aliens head-on. She shook her head. We all have our roles to play, Naruto. You don't get to monopolize the heroics. Before he could respond, a commotion from the training group drew their attention. 2 Anbu operatives had collided while attempting a synchronized attack, resulting in a minor chakra feedback that left both momentarily stunned. Rotation patterns need adjustment, Naruto murmured, more to himself than to Sakura. Team 4 is still overlapping with Team 2's approach vector. As he moved to address the issue, Sakura caught his arm gently. You've been running these sessions for 12 hours straight. Even with your enhanced stamina, you need rest. I'm fine, he replied automatically. As your medical advisor, I disagree, she countered, her tone leaving no room for argument. And as your friend, I'm concerned. The cellular restructuring from the karma requires recovery periods, or you risk degradation before the actual battle. Naruto hesitated, then nodded in acknowledgement. You're right. 2 more hours to correct these formation issues, then I'll rest. 1 hour, she negotiated, releasing his arm. Then I'm sending in Tsunade herself to drag you out if necessary. The threat, though delivered with a smile, was not entirely in jest. Naruto knew better than to push his luck against either of the formidable medical ninja. Agreed, he conceded. 1 hour. Satisfied, Sakura departed to check on the Anbu operatives who had collided, her hands already glowing with diagnostic chakra. Watching her efficient movements, Naruto felt a surge of appreciation for his teammate. Despite everything that had changed his transformation. Sasuke's return. The looming threat Sakura remained a constant, dependable presence, adapting to each new challenge with determination and skill. The hour passed quickly, and true to her word, Sakura returned to end the training session. The participants dispersed to rest and recover before the next day's exercises, leaving Naruto alone in the now quiet training ground. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the field as he dispelled the chakra simulacrum and gathered his notes. Productive session. The voice came from behind him, familiar yet unexpected. Naruto turned to find Ino leaning against a tree at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed casually over her purple training outfit. Very, he replied. Sakura mentioned the serum production is ahead of schedule. That's impressive work. Ino pushed off from the tree, crossing the distance between them with confident strides. My clan has been working around the clock. We're motivated by the vivid descriptions you provided of what happens to minds under Otsutsuki influence. She smiled thinly. Nothing like existential dread to boost productivity. Naruto winced slightly. Perhaps I was too graphic in my explanation. No, she countered immediately. We needed to understand the stakes. Sugarcoating the threat wouldn't help anyone prepare properly. They began walking together toward the village, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples ahead of them. I haven't seen you at the mental defense training sessions recently, Naruto observed after a moment. Been too busy with serum production, Ino explained. But I've mastered the techniques you taught. Watch. She stopped walking, closed her eyes briefly in concentration, and then opened them with newfound intensity. The air around her shimmered subtly as she erected a mental barrier that even Naruto's enhanced senses could detect a precise application of the protective techniques he had taught the sensor Nin core. Impressive, he acknowledged genuinely, your control is exceptional. Had a good teacher, she replied with a wink that somehow managed to be both playful and serious simultaneously. As they resumed walking, she added more soberly, 14 days left. Are we really going to be ready? The question wasn't asked in panic or doubt, but with pragmatic assessment, something Naruto had come to appreciate about Ino. Beneath her sometimes flamboyant exterior lay a mind of remarkable clarity and strategic thinking. Yes, he answered with quiet confidence. Not without casualties, and not without struggle, but we will be ready. After a moment's consideration, he added, your clan's contributions have significantly improved our preparations. Good, she said simply. Then, after a brief hesitation, I'm heading home to another thrilling evening of serum production. Care to join me? I could use a second pair of hands, and I happen to know Sakura ordered you to rest, which does not mean more training or strategy sessions on your own. Naruto found himself smiling at her perceptiveness. That obvious, is it? To those who know you, she confirmed. Besides, my father has questions about some of the finer points of mental shielding against Otsutsuki techniques. 2 birds, 1 stone. The invitation seemed practical enough, yet something in her tone suggested additional layers to the offer. Before he could respond, another familiar chakra signature approached Hinata, arriving slightly early for their scheduled evening training session. Naruto-kun, she greeted as she joined them, acknowledging Ino with a polite nod. Yamanaka-san. Hyuga, Ino returned with equal politeness, though Naruto detected a subtle shift in her chakra pattern, something almost competitive flickering briefly before being suppressed. I was just inviting Naruto to assist with serum production this evening, Ino explained, her casual tone perfectly maintained. But it seems he already has plans. Hinata's pale eyes moved between them, missing nothing. Actually, I came to suggest postponing our session. You've been training continuously all day, and the Tensegan development puts significant strain on your chakra network when you assist me. Her consideration touched Naruto, especially knowing how dedicated she was to mastering the advanced eye technique before the Otsutsuki arrived. Are you sure? He asked. One night won't significantly impact progress, she confirmed with a gentle smile. Rest is also part of training. Well then, Ino interjected cheerfully, problem solved. Naruto can help with serum production, which is technically rest since it's just sitting and infusing chakra into prepared solutions, and you can have tomorrow's session with fresh energy. Naruto looked between the two kunoichi, getting the distinct impression he was missing some unspoken communication passing between them. Something in Hinata's expression shifted, a momentary calculations happening behind her composed features before she nodded. That's an excellent suggestion, she agreed with such serene graciousness that even Ino seemed surprised. The serum production is critical to our defense strategy. With practiced elegance, Hinata performed a small bow. I'll see you tomorrow evening, Naruto-kun. Perhaps we can extend the session to compensate for tonight. Before either could respond, she turned and departed with the fluid grace characteristic of her clan, leaving Naruto and Ino standing in mild bewilderment. Did I just? Ino began. Get outmaneuvered by Hinata, Hyuga? Naruto finished, a hint of amusement in his voice. I believe you did. Ino let out a surprised laugh. Impressive. There's definitely more to her than meets the eye. She shook her head in grudging respect before turning her attention back to Naruto. Well? Are you coming to make serum, or do you have some other secret training scheduled? Lead the way, he replied, finding himself genuinely looking forward to the change of pace. As they walked toward the Yamanaka compound, Naruto realized that despite the looming threat and constant preparations, these moments of connection with his precious people were exactly what Tsunade had meant, the parts of life worth protecting, worth fighting for. 14 days until the Otsutsuki arrived. Just enough time to strengthen not only their tactical preparations but also the bonds that would see them through the coming battle. The Yamanaka compound was a study in elegant functionality, buildings harmoniously integrated with carefully tended gardens designed not just for beauty but for the cultivation of specialized botanical components used in their clan techniques. Ino led Naruto through the main house to a laboratory space in the rear building, where several clan members worked with focused concentration over various stages of serum production. Inoichi Yamanaka, Ino's father and the clan head, looked up from a complex distillation apparatus as they entered. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Naruto, then warmed with welcome. Uzumaki-san, he greeted formally, setting aside his instruments. We're honored by your assistance. The honor is mine, Naruto replied with equal respect. Your clan's work may save thousands of minds from Otsutsuki influence. Inoichi studied him with experienced eyes that missed little. The karma's integration continues to advance, I see. The chakra patterns are more harmonized than when I last observed them. Naruto nodded, unsurprised by the astute observation. As a master of mind techniques, Inoichi's perception of chakra patterns was exceptionally refined. Let me show you where you can help, Ino interjected, guiding Naruto to a workstation where several sealed containers held a golden liquid similar to what they had tested earlier, but with subtle differences in color and consistency. The base serum is prepared, she explained, but needs specific chakra infusion to activate the neural protective properties. We've found that adding a trace of nature energy significantly enhances its effectiveness and stability. Which is why I'm here, Naruto concluded, understanding immediately. His ability to manipulate nature energy remained unparalleled, even with the karma's additions to his capabilities. Exactly, Ino confirmed. If you could infuse these batches, it would accelerate production considerably. For the next several hours, Naruto worked alongside the Yamanaka clan members, carefully infusing precisely calibrated amounts of nature energy into each batch of serum. The work required focus and control rather than raw power, a welcome change from the combat training he had been conducting. Around them, clan members moved with quiet efficiency, some preparing botanical components, others testing completed batches on specially designed chakra-sensitive mediums. As the evening progressed, the laboratory gradually emptied until only Naruto, Ino, and Inoichi remained, finalizing the day's production. That's the last batch, Ino announced with satisfaction, sealing the final container. With these, we can supply the entire first and second response teams, plus the sensor core. Inoichi nodded approval, checking the production totals in a logbook. Excellent progress. At this rate, we'll meet our targets with days to spare. He turned to Naruto with genuine appreciation. Your assistance has been invaluable, Uzumaki-san. Please, just Naruto is fine, he replied, and I'm glad to help. Inoichi smiled, the expression softening his serious features. Then Naruto it is. He closed the logbook and straightened. I'll deliver these to the medical division. Ino, perhaps you could show our guest to the gardens? The night-blooming mindfulness lilies are particularly effective for chakra recuperation. Something about the suggestion seemed to amuse Ino, though she maintained a composed expression. Of course, father. With a respectful nod to both of them, Inoichi gathered the completed serum containers and departed, leaving Naruto and Ino alone in the now quiet laboratory. Subtle, isn't he? Ino remarked with a small laugh once her father was out of earshot. I'm not sure I follow, Naruto admitted. He's giving us some privacy, she explained, removing her lab apron and hanging it on a nearby hook. The mindfulness lilies are real and they do help with chakra recovery, but that's not why he suggested it. Understanding dawned on Naruto. Ah, don't worry, Ino assured him, her blue eyes sparkling with amusement. I'm not going to compromise the savior of the world right before an alien invasion. But the gardens really are worth seeing, and you could use the recovery benefits. Outside, the night had fully settled over Konoha, stars bright in the clear sky above. The Yamanaka gardens were transformed in the moonlight, certain flowers closing while others opened to the night air, releasing subtle fragrances that seemed to enhance chakra flow simply by being inhaled. They walked in comfortable silence along stone paths that wound between carefully arranged beds of plants, some familiar, others rare specimens collected from across the shinobi nations. In a secluded corner, they came upon a pond surrounded by luminescent blue flowers that seemed to pulse gently with their own inner light. The mindfulness lilies, Ino explained, gesturing to a stone bench beside the pond, best experienced sitting in meditation position. Naruto followed her lead, settling into a cross-legged position on the bench. Almost immediately, he felt the lilies affect a gentle, cooling sensation that seemed to spread through his chakra network, soothing the constant burn of the karma's integration process. This is remarkable, he observed, genuinely impressed. I've never encountered plants with such specific chakra effects. My clan has cultivated them for 15 generations, Ino explained with quiet pride. Each generation adding refinements to the breeding process. These particular specimens are the result of my mother's work before she died. The personal information was offered casually, but Naruto sensed the emotional significance behind it. They're beautiful, he said simply. She created something extraordinary. Ino smiled, the expression soft and genuine in the lily's blue glow. She would have liked you, I think. The new you, especially. She always appreciated people who balanced power with perception. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, allowing the flower's effect to work through their chakra systems. The quiet was different from the tense, strategy-filled silences that had dominated Naruto's days recently. This was peaceful, restorative. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ino finally said, echoing their earlier conversation in the flower shop. "Of course." She turned slightly to face him better, her expression thoughtful. "With everything that's happened, the karma, the coming battle, all these changes, what do you want for yourself afterward, assuming we win?" The question caught Naruto off guard. Since receiving the karma, his focus had been entirely on the immediate threat and preparing to counter it. The concept of afterward had remained abstract, undefined. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted honestly. "Maybe you should," Ino suggested. "Fighting for the world is important, but having something personal to fight for matters too." Her gaze was direct but gentle. What does Naruto Uzumaki want for his life, beyond saving everyone else's? The question resonated more deeply than he had expected. Before the karma, his ambitions had been clear: become Hokage, earn the village's recognition, bring Sasuke home. Now, with Sasuke returned and his powers elevated beyond what most Hokage ever achieved, those goals seemed simultaneously fulfilled and transformed. "Connection," he finally answered, surprising himself with the response. "I want to use what I've become to protect those precious to me, yes, but also to understand this universe better, to connect our world with the broader reality the karma has revealed exists beyond it. Not in the parasitic way the Otsutsuki do, but in a way that enriches rather than exploits." Ino studied him with unexpected intensity. "That's bigger than I expected, and very you, somehow, despite how much you've changed." "What about you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "What does Ino Yamanaka want after all this?" She laughed softly. "Nothing quite so cosmic. To develop my clan's techniques further. To maybe lead the intelligence division someday." She paused, then added more quietly, "To find someone who sees me, really sees me beyond the confident exterior." The vulnerability in her admission created a moment of unexpected intimacy between them. Without overthinking, Naruto reached out and gently covered her hand with his own where it rested on the bench between them. "I see you, Ino," he said simply. "Your brilliant mind. Your determination. The way you care deeply while pretending to be casual about it." Surprise flickered across her features, followed by something softer. "Careful, Uzumaki. Comments like that could give a girl ideas." Before he could respond, she leaned forward and kissed him, not on the cheek this time, but briefly and softly on the lips. The contact lasted only a moment, but carried unmistakable intent. When she pulled back, her expression was a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction, challenge, and genuine warmth. "Something else for you to think about when you consider afterward." Standing smoothly, she offered her hand to help him up from the bench. "We should head back. You promised Sakura you'd rest, and I have early serum production tomorrow." As they walked back through the moonlit gardens, Naruto found himself in the unusual position of being slightly off balance, not from the kiss itself, but from the realization that amidst all the cosmic concerns and world-saving preparations, these human connections remained vitally important. Perhaps even more important precisely because of the larger threats they faced. At the compound's entrance, they paused to say goodnight. "Thank you for your help with the serum," Ino said, her professional demeanor mostly restored, though a hint of warmth remained in her eyes, "and for the company." "Thank you for the mindfulness, lilies," he replied, "and for the perspective." She smiled, understanding his meaning perfectly. 13 days left, Naruto. Make them count in all the ways that matter. With that, she turned and disappeared into the compound, leaving Naruto with much to consider as he made his way back to his apartment through the quiet village streets. 13 days until the Otsutsuki arrived. Preparations continued on all fronts: tactical, strategic, and now, unexpectedly, personal. The next morning found Naruto in an unexpected location: the academy grounds, surrounded by aspiring young shinobi who watched with wide-eyed fascination as he demonstrated basic chakra control techniques. Not the advanced combat maneuvers he had been teaching elite jonin, but foundational skills that any ninja needed to master. "Concentration is key," he explained to the circle of students. "Even the most powerful techniques begin with perfect control of your own chakra." But Naruto-sama, One bold young girl piped up, "We've heard you have so much chakra you can just overwhelm enemies. Why bother with control?" Naruto smiled at the question one his younger self might have asked. Power without control is like a river without banks, destructive and wasteful. True strength comes from directing your energy precisely where it's needed. To demonstrate, he held out his palm, forming a perfect Rasengan. But rather than the swirling blue sphere they had expected, this one was tiny, no larger than a marble, yet contained the same concentrated power as its full-sized version. The same technique, he explained as the children leaned forward in fascination, but refined to use exactly the chakra required, no more, no less. As the lesson continued, Naruto noticed Iruka Amino watching from the academy doorway, arms crossed and a satisfied smile on his face. When the demonstration concluded and the students reluctantly returned to their regular classes, the older teacher approached. "I appreciate you taking the time for this," Iruka said warmly, "especially with everything else demanding your attention." "Your message said it was important," Naruto replied simply. "And you were right, these children needed to see that even with all the changes, the fundamentals still matter." They walked together toward the academy building, nostalgia coloring the moment for both of them. "They look up to you, you know," Iruka commented. "Not just because of your power, but because of your journey. The troublemaker who became the village's protector." He chuckled softly. "Though I admit, seeing you lecture about the importance of chakra control is ironic given your academy days." Naruto laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound that had become rare since his transformation. Life has a way of teaching us what we most resisted learning. Inside, they paused at Iruka's classroom, momentarily empty as the students enjoyed their break period in the yard. The familiar space brought back memories, some challenging, others precious. "You've come so far," Iruka said quietly, genuine pride in his voice. "Further than I could have imagined when you were sitting in these seats, planning your next prank." "I had a good teacher," Naruto replied, the simple words carrying deep sincerity. "Someone who saw me when others didn't." Emotion flickered across Iruka's face before he composed himself. "The battle is coming soon, isn't it? The preparations haven't gone unnoticed, even with the classified nature of the threat." 13 days, Naruto confirmed. "We're as ready as we can be, but..." He hesitated, then admitted what he rarely verbalized to others. "The Otsutsuki are unlike anything we've faced before. Even with all our preparations, it will be challenging." Iruka nodded gravely, then reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a small package wrapped in simple cloth. "I was saving this," he explained, handing it to Naruto, "for when you became Hokage." Curious, Naruto unwrapped the package to reveal a headband, but not a standard issue. The metal plate bore Konoha's leaf symbol, but the fabric was a deep orange-red, reminiscent of autumn leaves. "I had it specially made," Iruka explained somewhat self-consciously. "Orange for you, red for your mother's hair. The fabric is reinforced with chakra-conductive thread." Naruto stared at the gift, unexpectedly moved by the thoughtfulness behind it. Despite all the cosmic concerns occupying his mind, this simple connection to his past and his identity struck a profound chord. "Thank you," he said simply, voice slightly rough with emotion. Iruka straightened, his teacher's demeanor returning. "Wear it into battle," he instructed firmly. "Not just as Konoha's weapon or the bearer of some alien power, but as Naruto Uzumaki, my former student and this village's heart." Without hesitation, Naruto removed his standard headband and replaced it with Iruka's gift. The fabric seemed to adjust perfectly to his head, the weight comforting and familiar despite its newness. "I will," he promised. The classroom fell silent for a moment, the bond between teacher and former student transcending words. The moment was interrupted by the bell signaling the end of break period. Soon, the hallway outside would fill with returning students. "I should go," Naruto said, moving toward the door. "Final strategy meeting with the cage representatives this afternoon." Iruka nodded understanding. "Go save the world," he said with a smile that couldn't quite mask his concern. "Just make sure you come back afterward." "Count on it," Naruto replied, the familiar phrase carrying the weight of a solemn vow. As he left the academy, the new headband a tangible reminder of his roots, Naruto found his resolve strengthened. The karma had changed him, expanded his capabilities and perspective beyond what he had ever imagined possible. But at his core, he remained Naruto Uzumaki of the Hidden Leaf, a connection worth fighting for. 13 days until the Otsutsuki arrived, and when they did, They would face not just the power he had gained, but the bonds that made him who he was. Evening found Naruto at Training Ground 11, waiting for Hinata to arrive for their postponed session. The new headband from Iruka rested comfortably against his forehead, its color catching the last golden rays of the setting sun. He sensed her approach before seeing her chakra signature had become increasingly distinctive as her Byakugan evolved toward the Tenseigan state. There was a luminous quality to her energy now, reminiscent of the moon's gentle but profound influence on the tides. "Your new headband suits you," she remarked as she entered the clearing. Her traditional training clothes had been replaced with a more combat-oriented outfit fitted lavender and white armor with the Hyuga crest subtly incorporated into its design. "A gift from Iruka-sensei," Naruto explained, noting her new attire with approval. "You've updated your combat gear." Hinata nodded, performing a quick stretch to demonstrate the outfit's flexibility, designed specifically for the coming battle. The material incorporates chakra-conductive fibers that enhance gentle fist techniques. Without further preamble, she activated her Byakugan. The veins around her eyes pronounced as expected, but now a subtle blue tint had appeared in her pupils, evidence of her progress toward the Tenseigan. "You've been practicing on your own," Naruto observed, pleased. "Every morning and evening," she confirmed. "The chakra convergence exercises you taught me are becoming more natural." He stepped closer, examining the development with his enhanced senses. "Impressive progress. Tonight, we should attempt the next phase, chakra harmonization with celestial energy." Understanding passed between them without need for further explanation. Over the past weeks, their training sessions had developed a rhythm of their own, each intuitively grasping what the other intended with minimal verbal communication. They moved to the center of the clearing where moonlight now bathed the ground in silver. Standing facing each other, they began the synchronized breathing pattern that served as foundation for the advanced technique. "Focus on the resonance between your chakra and the moon's natural energy," Naruto instructed quietly. "The Tenseigan draws power from this specific harmony." Hinata closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, then opened them with renewed focus. Slowly, she extended her hands, palms facing upward toward the moon overhead. Naruto mirrored her position, his karma markings beginning to spread across his skin as he channeled specific energies to guide her progress. "I can feel it," she whispered, awe in her voice. "Like threads of silver connecting to my chakra network." "Good," Naruto encouraged. "Now, draw that energy inward, toward the central point between your eyes. Let it infuse your Byakugan naturally, without forcing the connection." As she followed his guidance, the air around them began to shimmer with faint luminescence, moonlight seeming to bend and concentrate around Hinata's form. The blue tint in her pupils intensified, spreading subtly into the white of her eyes. "The convergence is happening," Naruto observed, both with his physical senses and with the karma's enhanced perception. "Your chakra network is adapting to accommodate the celestial energy." Hinata's breathing remained steady, her concentration unwavering despite the significant energy now flowing through her system. Years of Hyuga discipline had prepared her well for this challenge. "Now," Naruto continued, "extend your perception outward again, but this time through the lens of this new energy. See beyond physical form to the essence of things." Her gaze shifted, focusing beyond him to the trees and stones of the training ground. "Everything appears connected," she reported, wonder in her voice. "I can see chakra networks not just in living beings, but traces of energy in everything, the earth, the air, even remnants of past movements lingering in the space." "The Tenseigan perceives the interconnected nature of all things," Naruto confirmed. "This expanded awareness is just the beginning of its capabilities." For nearly an hour, they maintained the delicate energy exchange, Naruto guiding Hinata's exploration of her evolving visual powers. When they finally released the technique, both were breathing more heavily from the sustained concentration. But Hinata's eyes retained a faint blue tinge even after her Byakugan deactivated. "Permanent changes are beginning," Naruto noted with satisfaction. "The transformation is taking hold." Hinata nodded, blinking as she readjusted to normal vision. "How much further until full manifestation?" "At this rate, perhaps 3 or 4 more sessions," he estimated. "Your natural affinity for the transformation is remarkable." They settled on a fallen log at the edge of the clearing, taking a moment to recover before continuing with the physical training portion of their session. The night air was cool but pleasant, stars now fully visible overhead. "May I ask you something personal?" Hinata ventured after a comfortable silence. Naruto smiled slightly at the familiar phrasing, reminded of Ino's similar question the previous evening, of course. The karma, does it show you only one possible future? Her perceptive gaze studied him thoughtfully. Or does it reveal multiple paths? The question displayed an insight into the nature of the karma that surprised him. Multiple possibilities, he confirmed. Urashiki's memories contain countless variations of events, different choices and their consequences across multiple worlds they harvested. Hinata considered this thoughtfully. Then you've seen many possible outcomes for our world, for all of us. Fragments, he clarified. The karma doesn't grant perfect foresight, only glimpses of potential paths based on Otsutsuki experience. She nodded, digesting this information. And in these glimpses, what have you seen of your own path? After the battle, assuming we succeed? The parallel to Ino's question about afterward was striking. Naruto found himself wondering if this was coincidence or if the two kunoichi had somehow coordinated their inquiries. Divergent possibilities, he answered honestly. Somewhere I continue to evolve with the karma's power, eventually transcending ordinary human limitations entirely. Others where I find ways to balance this power with a more conventional existence. And which path do you prefer? Hinata asked, her voice soft but direct. Naruto considered the question carefully before answering. I once dreamed only of recognition, of becoming Hokage and being acknowledged by the village. Now, with the perspective the karma provides. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I still value connection above all else, but my understanding of what that means has expanded. I see possibilities for bringing together worlds, for establishing something more than just peace within our own borders. But not at the cost of your humanity, Hinata observed astutely. No, he agreed. That remains the line I won't cross, the distinction between myself and the Otsutsuki. They seek power through consumption and domination. Whatever path I take must be founded on protection and harmony. Hinata's expression warmed with something that might have been pride. That answer sounds very much like the Naruto I've always known. Before he could respond, she reached out and gently touched the karma markings visible on his hand. Where their skin connected, a curious resonance occurred, the patterns briefly glowing with blue-white light as her evolving Tensagen energy harmonized with the karma's power. Our paths are connected now, she said quietly. Through this training, through the coming battle, and perhaps beyond if you wish it. The invitation in her words was clear but undemanding, offered without pressure or expectation, simply as a possibility among the many he now perceived. In response, Naruto turned his hand to clasp hers gently. I do wish it, he replied with equal directness. Your presence has been clarifying. Amid all these changes, you see me as I am, neither defined solely by what I was nor by what I'm becoming. Something shifted in the air between them, a tension resolved, a possibility acknowledged. With the simple grace that characterized all her movements, Hinata leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in a kiss both gentle and certain. Unlike his moment with Ino, this kiss carried different emotions, not a challenge or declaration, but a confirmation of something long understood between them. When they separated, her pale eyes met his directly, a soft smile playing at her lips. We should complete the training session, she suggested pragmatically, though warmth remained in her voice. Only 12 days remained before the battle. Naruto nodded, returning to his feet with renewed focus. Let's continue with the protective barrier techniques. They'll be essential when facing Momoshiki's ranged attacks. As they resumed their training, moving through complex patterns of energy manipulation and physical combat maneuvers, Naruto found himself reflecting on the contrast between his interactions with Ino and Hinata, each offering different but equally compelling connections. The karma had expanded his perception of possibilities, but the choice of which paths to explore remained entirely his own. 12 days until the Otsutsuki arrived. As preparations intensified on all fronts, the personal connections that anchored him to his humanity became not distractions from his purpose, but foundations for it. The days continued their relentless march forward. 10 days before the anticipated arrival, Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument under the light of a full moon, the Valley of the End clearly visible in the distance despite being kilometers away. His enhanced vision could make out the details of the preparatory work being done there, specialized sealing arrays being established around the perimeter, sensor equipment being installed at strategic points, defensive structures taking shape. Impressive progress, Sasuke remarked, stepping out of a spatial rift to stand beside him. In the days since his return, The last Uchiha had embraced his role in the coming battle, dividing his time between reconnaissance missions and specialized training with selected shinobi. On schedule, Naruto agreed. The dimensional anchor will be positioned tomorrow, and final force deployments will be in place 3 days before the expected arrival. Sasuke studied the distant valley through his mismatched eyes, the Rinnegan gleaming faintly in the moonlight. I've been analyzing the information you provided on Momoshiki and Kinshiki. Their partnership dynamic is unusual. More master and servant than equals, Naruto confirmed. Kinshiki is pledged to Momoshiki as a guardian and eventual sacrifice. Sacrifice. Otsutsuki partners follow a cycle. When the guardian reaches his limit, he is consumed by his master to increase the master's power. Naruto's expression darkened slightly. It's why they travel in pairs. One eventually becomes food for the other. Sasuke absorbed this information with typical stoicism. Can we use that against them? Force the consumption prematurely? Potentially, Naruto acknowledged. If Kinshiki is severely wounded but not killed, Momoshiki might choose to absorb him rather than risk losing his power entirely. And in that moment of transformation, they would be vulnerable, Naruto finished. But only briefly. The power surge afterward would make Momoshiki significantly more dangerous. They fell silent, each contemplating the strategic implications. Below them, Konoha continued its evening activities, most civilians unaware of the specific threat approaching, though the general state of heightened readiness was impossible to miss. I encountered Sakura at the medical compound earlier, Sasuke mentioned after a while, his tone carefully neutral. She's developed new battlefield treatment protocols specifically designed for injuries caused by Otsutsuki techniques. Her medical innovations have been crucial to our preparations, Naruto agreed. Then, sensing the underlying current in his friend's statement, he added, "Have you two spoken? Beyond mission parameters?" Sasuke's gaze remained fixed on the distant horizon. Briefly, things between us are complicated. They don't have to be, Naruto observed quietly. A faint smile, barely perceptible, curved the corner of Sasuke's mouth. Says the man juggling the attentions of at least 2 notable kunoichi. Naruto raised an eyebrow, surprised by the unexpected teasing from his typically stoic friend. You've noticed. The entire village has noticed, Sasuke replied dryly. The Hyuga heiress and the Yamanaka mine specialist both orbiting the newly transformed karma bearer. It hasn't gone unremarked. Rather than embarrassment, Naruto felt a curious mix of amusement and thoughtfulness. The karma has given me perspective on many things, including the artificial limitations we place on human connections. Philosophizing now. Sasuke's tone was sardonic, but not unkind. The power really has changed you. Not as much as you might think, Naruto countered. I've always valued bonds above all else. I just understand them differently now, see more possibilities in how they can manifest. Sasuke considered this, then asked with uncharacteristic directness, and after the battle? What then? If we succeed. Naruto began. When we succeed, Sasuke corrected firmly. Naruto nodded, accepting the amendment. When we succeed, there will be choices to make. For all of us. He glanced at his friend. Including you. Sasuke didn't respond immediately, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out over the village, a place he had once abandoned, then helped save, and now found himself defending once more. 10 days, he finally said, changing the subject back to the immediate concern. I'll continue enhancing the spatial barriers around the battlefield. My Rinnegan can detect weaknesses in the dimensional fabric that others might miss. Good, Naruto agreed, allowing the personal conversation to recede. I'm meeting with the sensor division at dawn to calibrate the final detection grid. Their planning continued for another hour, each contributing their unique perspective to refining the battle strategy. Despite the years of separation and conflict between them, their minds still worked in remarkable tandem when united toward a common goal, a partnership forged in rivalry and tempered by shared adversity. As they prepared to depart, Sasuke paused, fixing Naruto with an evaluating look. The karma suits you, he said unexpectedly. Not the power itself, but how you've adapted to it. Integrated it without being consumed by it. Coming from Sasuke, who had walked the dangerous path of seeking power at any cost, the observation carried particular weight. Thank you, Naruto replied simply. With a brief nod, Sasuke stepped backward into another spatial rift, disappearing as suddenly as he had arrived. Left alone on the monument, Naruto turned his attention fully to the Valley of the End once more, mentally reviewing every aspect of their preparations. 10 days until the Otsutsuki arrived. The pieces were moving into position, the strategy taking final form. All that remained was to execute it perfectly when the moment came. The week before the anticipated arrival passed in a blur of final preparations. The allied shinobi forces converged on the staging areas around the Valley of the End, each division running through their assigned protocols with practiced precision. The dimensional anchor had been positioned at the exact center of the valley, its crystalline structure pulsing with otherworldly energy as it established its connection to the approaching Otsutsuki. 3 days before the expected confrontation, Naruto stood at the command post overlooking the valley, surrounded by the 5 Kage and their chief strategists. The massive tactical display before them showed the positioning of every unit, the layered defensive perimeters, and the specialized response teams positioned at critical intersections. Final sensor grid calibration is complete, Ao reported, the sensor specialist from Kirigakure adjusting controls on the monitoring equipment. We'll have 90 seconds of advance warning once dimensional distortion begins. Medical teams are in position at all 3 field hospitals, Tsunade confirmed. Deployment of the mental shielding serum is at 97% completion among combat personnel. Evacuation of civilians within the potential impact zone is complete, the Tsuchikage added. Barrier teams are stationed at 50-kilometer intervals to contain any widespread chakra effects. Naruto nodded, absorbing the updates with focused attention. After weeks of preparation, they had done everything possible to prepare for the coming threat. Now, the final adjustments were about contingencies and ensuring every participant understood their role in the complex battle plan. There's one additional factor to consider, he said, drawing the Kage's attention. Based on the Sentinel's information and the Karma's knowledge, there's a possibility that Momoshiki and Kinshiki won't be the only threat we face. Explain, the Raikage demanded, his massive arms crossed over his chest. The Otsutsuki often employ advanced scouts or specialized constructs to test defenses before fully committing to battle, Naruto elaborated. These could manifest before or during the main confrontation. Why are we only hearing about this now? Onoki asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Because confirmation came only hours ago, Naruto replied evenly. The dimensional anchor has begun detecting secondary ripples approaching alongside the primary distortion, smaller, but definitely related. This information created a stir among the assembled leaders. Shikaku Nara, Konoha's chief strategist, immediately stepped forward to address the tactical implications. We should establish a secondary response team specifically for these advanced threats, he suggested, fingers already moving pieces on the tactical display. Drawn from our sensor and rapid response units, positioned here and here to intercept without compromising our main defensive formation. Agreed, Gaara said, his calm voice cutting through the tension. I'll assign a contingent of Sand Shinobi to support this team. Their mobility will be valuable if multiple threats emerge simultaneously. As the adjustments to the battle plan continued, Naruto sensed a familiar presence approaching the command post. Moments later, Kakashi entered, accompanied by Sakura and Sai. Team 7 reporting as requested, Kakashi announced, his visible eye taking in the tactical display with practiced assessment. Final preparations for our specialized counter-team are complete. Tsunade nodded acknowledgement. Good. Your team will be positioned at the primary engagement point, alongside Naruto and Sasuke. Your objective remains the same: exploit any opening to target Momoshiki and Kinshiki's specific vulnerabilities while the main forces maintain containment. Where is Uchiha? The Raikage inquired, noticing Sasuke's absence. Final reconnaissance, Kakashi replied. He's using the Rinnegan to monitor the dimensional approach vectors for any unexpected developments. He'll rejoin us by nightfall. The planning session continued for several more hours, each contingency examined and response protocols established. As the sun began to set, the meeting finally concluded, with each leader departing to brief their respective forces on the updated strategy. Naruto remained at the command post after the others had left, studying the tactical display with focused intensity. 3 days. After weeks of preparation, the culmination was nearly upon them. You should rest, Sakura advised, returning to find him still reviewing the battle plans. You'll need your full strength when they arrive. Just ensuring nothing's been overlooked, he replied, though he did step back from the display at her suggestion. Sakura moved to stand beside him, her medical expertise evident in how her eyes assessed his condition. The karma's integration it's accelerated in the past week, hasn't it? Naruto nodded, not surprised she had noticed. As the Otsutsuki approach, the resonance strengthens. The seal responds to their proximity. Is it painful? She asked directly. Manageable, he answered, which wasn't quite a denial. Sakura frowned slightly. That's not what I asked. The concern in her voice prompted honesty. Yes, at times. Particularly at night when other distractions are minimal. But Hinata's techniques help considerably. Something flickered briefly across Sakura's expression at the mention of Hinata, not jealousy exactly, but a complex emotion he couldn't quite identify. I've developed a specialized pain management formula, she said after a moment, reaching into her medical pouch and producing a small vial containing a luminescent blue liquid. Based on the Yamanaka clan's mental shielding serum, but adapted specifically for the unique chakra patterns of the karma. Naruto accepted the vial, genuinely touched by her thoughtfulness. Thank you, Sakura. 3 drops under the tongue, no more than twice daily, she instructed professionally. It should reduce the integration discomfort without diminishing your sensory capabilities. He nodded, securing the vial carefully. I appreciate this, and everything you've done to prepare our forces. Sakura smiled, though her eyes remained serious. Just doing my part, like everyone else. After a brief hesitation, she added, you know, when you first returned with the karma, I was worried we might lose the Naruto we knew, that all that alien knowledge and power might overshadow who you've always been. And now? He asked, curious about her assessment. Now I see it differently, she replied thoughtfully. You haven't been replaced or overshadowed. You've expanded. Like you've become more fully yourself, with new dimensions I never recognized were possible. The insight surprised him not just for its perceptiveness, but for how closely it aligned with his own experience of the transformation. That's remarkably accurate, he acknowledged. Sakura laughed softly, the sound relieving some of the tension that had built throughout the day. I've known you since we were children, Naruto. Whatever power you gain, whatever you become, I recognize the heart driving it. The simple statement carried more meaning than its words alone might suggest, an affirmation of their bond that transcended the changes life had brought to both of them. 3 days, she continued more pragmatically. Get some rest. Doctor's orders. With that, she turned to leave, pausing only briefly at the command post entrance. Oh, and Naruto? Hinata and Ino aren't the only ones who've noticed how you've changed. A hint of her old teasing smile appeared. Just something else to think about. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving Naruto with the curious sense that the personal dynamics surrounding him were evolving just as rapidly as the battle preparations. 3 days until the Otsutsuki arrived. As night fell over the valley, Naruto finally departed the command post, acknowledging that even with his enhanced stamina, rest would indeed be necessary for what lay ahead. The complex chess game was nearing its critical phase, pieces positioned across the board. Soon, the opposing kings would enter play, and the true test would begin. The day before the predicted arrival dawned with an unnatural stillness. Birds had vacated the valley and surrounding forests, instinctively sensing the approaching disturbance in the natural order. The allied shinobi forces maintained their positions with disciplined focus, final equipment checks and briefings conducted in hushed, efficient tones. At the forward observation post nearest the dimensional anchor, Naruto stood with his closest allies, Team 7, Hinata, whose Tensagen development had earned her a position on the primary response team, and Ino, whose mental shielding expertise would be crucial in the initial engagement. Sasuke had returned from his reconnaissance, his expression grim as he reported his findings. The dimensional fabric is already beginning to thin, he explained, pointing toward areas only visible to his Rinnegan. Not enough to trigger our sensor grid yet, but the approach has definitely accelerated. How much time? Kakashi asked. 18 hours at most, Sasuke estimated, possibly sooner. Naruto nodded, having sensed the same disturbance through the karma's resonance. The anchor is functioning as intended. It's drawing them to this specific location rather than allowing them to choose their arrival point. Then our strategy remains viable, Sai concluded, dark eyes scanning the valley below where the final defensive preparations were being completed. Hinata activated her evolving Byakugan, the blue tint in her pupils now more pronounced after their intensive training sessions. I can see the anchor's energy field extending upward, she reported. it creates a funnel-like structure through dimensional space. Good, Naruto confirmed. That will force them to materialize exactly where we've prepared the containment array. For a moment, the group fell silent, each contemplating the imminent confrontation from their own perspective. Despite weeks of preparation, the reality of facing beings with power comparable to Kagaya remained daunting. There's something we should discuss, Naruto said, breaking the silence. A contingency I've been developing based on the karma's knowledge. All eyes turned to him with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. If conventional methods prove insufficient, I may be able to use the karma's connection to Urashiki to directly counter Momoshiki's abilities, he explained, essentially fighting Otsutsuki power with Otsutsuki power. That sounds risky, Sakura observed cautiously. It is, Naruto acknowledged. Fully activating the karma's potential requires temporarily allowing Urashiki's data to have greater influence over my system. The danger is that this could accelerate the integration process unpredictably. Meaning what, exactly? Kakashi asked, his visible eye narrowed in concern. Meaning I might gain access to Urashiki's full power set, but with increased risk of his consciousness attempting to reassert itself, Naruto clarified. I believe I can maintain control, but it's not without danger. This is the first we're hearing of this option, Sasuke noted, his tone neutral but his gaze intense. Why now? Because it should remain a last resort, Naruto replied honestly. Our primary strategy is sound and should be sufficient. This is only if all else fails. Hinata stepped forward, her evolved eyes studying the karma markings on his arm with concern. The strain on your chakra network would be extreme, she observed. Possibly permanently damaging. Which is why it's a contingency only, he confirmed. But you all deserve to know it exists as an option. The group exchanged glances, processing this new information. Finally, Ino broke the tension with characteristic directness. Well, let's make sure it doesn't come to that, then, she stated firmly. Our plan is solid. We hit them hard and fast while the anchor dampens their absorption abilities, and we don't give them time to recover. Her confidence seemed to revitalize the group, turning their focus back to the primary strategy rather than dwelling on worst-case scenarios. Ino's right, Sakura agreed. We've prepared for this. Every shinobi knows their role. We have advantages Kaguya's opponents never had: advance warning, strategic preparation, and specific knowledge of our enemy's capabilities. Kakashi nodded approvingly at his former students. Well said. Now, let's review the Phase 1 engagement sequence one more time, while we have the chance. As they gathered around the tactical display, Naruto felt a renewed appreciation for these bonds that had sustained him throughout his life. Whatever power the karma had granted him, these connections remained his greatest strength, the foundation that kept him anchored to his humanity even as his capabilities expanded beyond ordinary limits. The day progressed with final preparations, each unit conducting last-minute drills and equipment checks. As evening approached, an unusual quiet settled over the encampment, not the tense silence of fear, but the focused calm of warriors centering themselves before battle. After the final briefing with the 5 Kage, Naruto found a moment of solitude atop a cliff overlooking the valley. The dimensional anchor glowed softly in the gathering darkness below, its crystalline structure pulsing with otherworldly energy as it continued drawing their approaching enemies to the prepared battleground. He sensed Hinata's approach before hearing her footsteps. Her chakra signature had become increasingly distinctive as the Tenseigan evolution progressed. The sensor teams are reporting the first anomalies in the dimensional barrier, she said as she joined him at the cliff edge. Still minor, but accelerating. Sasuke's estimate was accurate. Naruto nodded, having felt the disturbances himself through the karma's resonance. By dawn, then. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky above, the same stars that had witnessed countless battles throughout the shinobi world's turbulent history, now bearing witness to perhaps its most consequential confrontation. I wanted to give you something, Hinata said finally, reaching into a small pouch at her waist, before tomorrow. She withdrew a finely crafted bracelet, simple in design but clearly made with exceptional skill. Thin strands of silvery metal were woven together with threads that seemed to catch the moonlight with unusual brilliance. It's made from chakra-conductive alloy and infused with Tenseigan energy, she explained as she offered it to him. It won't add to your power, but it creates a harmonic resonance that should help stabilize the karma during intense chakra output. Naruto accepted the gift, immediately sensing the subtle harmony she described as the bracelet's energy synchronized with the karma's patterns. "This is remarkable craftsmanship," he said, genuinely impressed as he secured it around his wrist. "When did you have time to create this?" "Between training sessions," she replied with a small smile. "The Hyuga have traditions of creating chakra-harmonizing jewelry, though this is a unique application." As the bracelet settled against his skin, Naruto felt a subtle but noticeable effect. The constant background discomfort of the karma's integration process eased slightly, the seal's patterns flowing more harmoniously across his arm. "Thank you," he said simply, the words inadequate for the thoughtfulness behind the gift. Before he could say more, another familiar presence approached Ino, her chakra signature bright and distinctive against the evening calm. "Sorry to interrupt," she said as she joined them, though her tone suggested limited regret. "Thought you should know the mental shielding serum distribution is complete. Every combatant has been treated, and we've established the psychic defense network around the perimeter." "Excellent work," Naruto acknowledged. "That will be crucial when Momoshiki attempts his mental influence techniques." Ino nodded, then noticed the bracelet now adorning his wrist. Her perceptive eyes took in its design and likely purpose immediately. "Nice," she commented, genuine appreciation in her voice. "Hyuga chakra harmonization craft, right? Smart application for stabilizing the karma's fluctuations." If Hinata was surprised by Ino's ready identification of her gift, she didn't show it. Instead, there seemed to be a moment of mutual respect between the two kunoichi rivals in some sense, perhaps, but united in their support of the battle ahead. "I should check the Eastern sensor grid before turning in," Hinata said after a moment. They were making final calibrations earlier. With a respectful nod to both of them, she departed as gracefully as she had arrived, leaving Naruto and Ino alone atop the cliff. "So," Ino said once Hinata was out of earshot, "dawn tomorrow." "Most likely," Naruto confirmed. Ino moved to stand beside him, her gaze sweeping over the valley where thousands of shinobi were making final preparations for the coming battle. "Strange, isn't it? After all these years of fighting each other, the five great nations united against a common enemy." "Not so strange," Naruto replied. "When people recognize a shared thread to everything they value, old conflicts often fade in importance." Philosophical again, she teased lightly, though her expression remained thoughtful. "The karma's influence?" "Partly," he admitted, "but also just perspective, seeing the bigger picture." They stood in companionable silence for a while, the night air cool but pleasant around them. Eventually, Ino turned to face him directly, her blue eyes reflecting the starlight above. "I have something for you too," she said, reaching into her equipment pouch. "Not as elegant as Hinata's gift, but potentially useful." She produced a small, intricately carved wooden box. When opened, it revealed 3 pills, each glowing with a subtle golden radiance similar to the mental shielding serum but more intensely concentrated. "Advanced mind barrier capsules," she explained. "Based on the same principle as the standard serum, but massively amplified. In theory, they should completely block any attempt at mental infiltration or chakra-based suggestion for approximately 5 minutes per dose." Naruto carefully lifted one of the pills, examining it with both physical and chakra senses. "The concentration is remarkable. These must have been extremely difficult to produce." "Nearly impossible, actually," Ino confirmed with a hint of pride. "They require precise chakra infusion techniques unique to my clan, plus some ingredients I'd rather not detail. Let's just say they're very limited in quantity." "Thank you," Naruto said, recognizing the tremendous value of such protection against Otsutsuki mental techniques. These could be decisive at a critical moment. "That's the idea," she replied. Then, with characteristic directness, she added, "Just make sure you survive to tell me how well they worked." Her tone was light, but the emotion behind it was genuine. Without hesitation, Naruto reached out and took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I intend to," he promised. Ino held his gaze for a moment longer, then leaned forward and kissed him briefly but firmly. Unlike their previous encounter in the garden, this wasn't a suggestion or invitation, it was a statement, perhaps even a claim. "Good," she said as she pulled back, her usual confidence firmly in place. "Because we have unfinished business to attend to after all this is over." With a final meaningful look, she turned and headed back toward the encampment, leaving Naruto with both her gift and the unmistakable sense that whatever the outcome of tomorrow's battle, the personal connections he had formed would continue to evolve in interesting ways. As night fully claimed the sky, Naruto remained at his vantage point a while longer, contemplating both the imminent confrontation and what might lie beyond it. The karma had revealed possibilities he had never imagined, expanding his perspective beyond the boundaries of his previous understanding. Yet his core, the values and bonds that defined him, remained unchanged. Tomorrow would test not just his power, but his identity, his ability to wield Otsutsuki abilities without succumbing to Otsutsuki nature. But he faced this challenge not alone, but strengthened by connections that transcended ordinary understanding. Dawn would bring the Otsutsuki, and Naruto Uzumaki would be ready. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Evolution's Edge. The pre-dawn air hung heavy with anticipation. A low mist clung to the valley floor, shrouding the massive statues of Hashirama and Madara in ghostly veils as the first hints of morning light crept above the eastern horizon. The dimensional anchor at the center of the valley pulsed with increasing frequency, its crystalline structure emitting soft, high-pitched tones that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. Naruto stood at the forward command post, the karma seal fully activated across his arm and extending partially up his neck. His enhanced senses detected subtle distortions in the atmosphere, microscopic tears in dimensional space that ordinary perception would miss entirely. Beside him, Sasuke's Rinnegan tracked similar anomalies, both of them monitoring the approaching threat without speaking. 3 minutes, Naruto finally said, breaking the tense silence. The dimensional barrier is thinning rapidly now. Sasuke nodded once, his mismatched eyes never leaving the center of the valley. The anchor is functioning as intended. They're being drawn to the exact coordinates we specified. Behind them, the primary response team maintained disciplined readiness. Kakashi, Sakura, Sai, Hinata, and Ino positioned according to the strategy they had rehearsed countless times. Further back, arranged in concentric rings around the valley, thousands of allied shinobi forces waited in formation, each unit prepared for their role in the complex battle plan. Sensor grid is registering critical threshold, reported a Hyuga clan member monitoring the equipment, dimensional breach imminent. Naruto touched the communication seal at his collar. All units, final positions. Phase 1 protocols active. Acknowledgements came from across the valley as teams confirmed their readiness. The 5 Kage had taken strategic positions at cardinal points around the battlefield, each commanding a specialized division designed to counter specific Otsutsuki abilities. 60 seconds, Sasuke announced, the Tomo in his Rinnegan spinning slowly as he tracked the escalating distortions. Naruto felt the karma responding to the approaching entities, a vibrating resonance that spread through his chakra network as the seal recognized its kindred energy. He welcomed the sensation, using it to gauge the nature of their imminent opponents. 2 distinct signatures, he confirmed. Momoshiki's dominant, Kinshiki's subordinate but massive in raw power, just as expected. Beside him, Hinata activated her evolved Byakugan, the blue-tinted pupils scanning the dimensional fabric with unprecedented clarity. The anchor is creating a funnel structure, she reported. They're being channeled directly to the containment array. Everyone remember, Kakashi addressed the team one final time, we have a 3-minute window when their absorption abilities are dampened. Make every second count. The air at the center of the valley suddenly stilled, the mist freezing in place as if time itself had paused. Then, with a sound like shattering glass amplified 1,000-fold, reality split open. A blinding light erupted from the tear, forcing even seasoned shinobi to shield their eyes despite their preparation. When the light receded, 2 figures stood where the dimensional anchor had been, its crystalline structure now shattered into fragments that dissolved like snowflakes in summer heat. Momoshiki Otsutsuki stood with imperious posture, his delicate, aristocratic features set in an expression of cold disdain. Pale skin contrasted with the red markings around his eyes, and his white robes seemed to glow with their own inner light. Beside him, the much larger Kinshiki loomed protectively, his massive frame and red skin presenting a stark contrast to his master's refined appearance. How primitive, Momoshiki's voice carried effortlessly across the valley, melodious yet dripping with contempt. They've gathered to witness their harvest. How thoughtful. Naruto stepped forward, positioning himself at the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley floor. The morning sun now crested the horizon behind him, casting his shadow long across the battlefield below. Momoshiki Otsutsuki, he called out, his voice amplified by precisely controlled chakra. You are not welcome on this world. The Otsutsuki's pale eyes widened slightly as he registered Naruto's presence, or more specifically, the karma visible on his exposed arm. Fascinating, Momoshiki murmured, genuine interest breaking through his contemptuous demeanor. Urashiki's vessel, yet clearly not fully converted. How did you manage that, I wonder? Without waiting for a response, Momoshiki's Baikugan activated, pale eyes studying Naruto with analytical intensity. Ah, I see. The Nine Tails chakra created an interference pattern. How? Fortuitous for you. Naruto met his gaze steadily. This world is under the protection of the allied shinobi forces. You will not harvest its chakra or its people. A cold, musical laugh escaped Momoshiki's lips. Protection? You speak as if you have a choice in the matter. His gaze swept dismissively over the assembled forces. Your world was marked for harvest long before your species developed consciousness. You are simply crop that has grown more interesting than most. Enough talk, Sasuke stated flatly, moving to stand beside Naruto. They know why we're here. Momoshiki's attention shifted to Sasuke, his eyes narrowing as he noted the Rinnegan. A Rinnegan wielder? On this backwater planet? The clan will find this most intriguing after I've added it to my collection. Kinshiki, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Lord Momoshiki, the dimensional anchor has disrupted our chakra absorption capabilities. They were prepared for our arrival. For the first time, a flicker of genuine surprise crossed Momoshiki's refined features. Impossible. No primitive world has ever. He paused, realization dawning. The Sentinels. They've interfered again. Now, Naruto commanded, activating the battle plan with a single word. Instantly, the containment array hidden beneath the valley floor activated sealing formulas blazing to life in concentric circles around the two Otsutsuki. Simultaneously, specialized chakra nullification barriers erected by the combined efforts of Konoha and Suna's sealing experts rose to enclose the battlefield. Not waiting for the enemies to recover from their momentary surprise, Naruto and Sasuke launched forward in perfect synchronization, covering the distance to the valley floor in an instant. Behind them, the primary response team moved according to their assigned patterns, each targeting specific tactical objectives. Naruto reached Momoshiki first, the karma on his arm blazing with blue-white energy as he unleashed a barrage of attacks specifically designed to counter Otsutsuki defenses. Each strike targeted the critical chakra points Hinata had identified during their planning sessions, vulnerabilities unique to Otsutsuki physiology. Momoshiki, despite his absorption abilities being temporarily dampened, moved with extraordinary speed, evading most attacks with graceful precision. Interesting, he commented, almost conversational despite the ferocity of Naruto's assault. You've gained more than just the karma from Urashiki. You've accessed his combat knowledge as well. Meanwhile, Sasuke engaged Kinshiki, his Rinnegan enhanced perception allowing him to anticipate the larger Otsutsuki's powerful but somewhat predictable attack patterns. Space-time ninjutsu carried him beyond the reach of Kinshiki's chakra weapons, while precisely timed counterattacks struck at the Guardian's defenses. Around them, the battlefield erupted with coordinated action as the allied shinobi forces executed their roles with disciplined precision. Sensor teams maintained constant monitoring of the dimensional stability, alert for any attempts by the Otsutsuki to summon reinforcements or escape. Long-range attack units positioned along the valley rim unleashed precisely calibrated jutsu designed to bypass absorption techniques, while medical teams stood ready to respond to casualties. Your preparation is impressive for lesser beings, Momoshiki acknowledged as he deflected another of Naruto's attacks. But ultimately futile, once my abilities fully restore. His statement cut short as Hinata and Neji appeared on either side of him, their synchronized gentle fist strikes targeting the precise chakra pathways Naruto had exposed. The blue glow of Hinata's evolving Tenseigan added unprecedented power to her attacks, momentarily disrupting Momoshiki's chakra network. The Otsutsuki's expression shifted from surprise to genuine pain, perhaps the first time in centuries he had experienced such a sensation. Impossible, he hissed, leaping backward to create distance. No primitive technique should penetrate my defenses. Naruto pressed the advantage, forming a Rasengan that incorporated the karma's energy patterns, a swirling sphere of normal chakra interwoven with the distinctive blue-white power of the Otsutsuki seal. "This world has evolved beyond your understanding," he stated calmly, driving the attack toward Momoshiki's chest. The Otsutsuki barely evaded, the attack grazing his side and tearing through his immaculate robes. Where the energy made contact, his pale skin blackened as if burned by cosmic fire. "Kinshiki!" Momoshiki called, genuine alarm entering his voice for the first time. "The vessel has weaponized the karma against us." Across the battlefield, Kinshiki struggled to disengage from Sasuke, whose Rinnegan abilities kept the massive guardian perpetually off balance. Adding to his difficulties, Kakashi and Sai had joined the engagement, their coordinated attacks forcing Kinshiki to defend from multiple vectors simultaneously. "Lord Momoshiki," the guardian called, genuine concern in his deep voice. "Their strategy is sound. We should." "No retreat," Momoshiki snapped, his aristocratic features hardening with determination. "I will not be humiliated by lesser beings." Despite his bravado, both Otsutsuki were clearly taken aback by the effectiveness of the allied forces' strategy. The dampening effect of the now destroyed anchor continued to suppress their absorption abilities, while the coordinated attacks prevented them from fully regrouping or implementing their own battle plan. As the engagement approached the critical 2-minute mark, Naruto sensed a subtle shift in Momoshiki's chakra, the dampening effect beginning to weaken as expected. "Phase 2, he commanded through the communication seal. 60 seconds to full capability restoration." Across the battlefield, the Allied forces responded instantly to the command, shifting tactics as rehearsed. Long-range attack units ceased their chakra-based techniques, switching to physical projectiles and earth manipulation attacks that couldn't be absorbed. Containment teams reinforced the sealing barriers, while the primary engagement groups prepared for the Otsutsuki's imminent power restoration. Momoshiki sensed the change as well, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Your time runs short, vessel," he observed. "In moments, your quaint strategies will become meaningless." Rather than responding verbally, Naruto executed a sequence of hand signs with blinding speed. The karma patterns extended further across his body, now covering his entire right side and beginning to spread across his chest. His right eye transformed, sclera darkening to black while the iris shifted to the brilliant blue compass pattern characteristic of activated Otsutsuki power. "Impressive adaptation," Momoshiki acknowledged, genuine interest briefly overriding his contempt. "But incomplete. A pale shadow of true Otsutsuki potential." "It's enough," Naruto replied calmly, then vanished in a burst of speed that even Momoshiki's Byakugan struggled to track. The Otsutsuki raised his defenses just in time to block Naruto's attack, a palm strike directly to his chest that, despite being partially deflected, still sent him sliding backward several meters. Before he could recover, Sasuke appeared behind him, Rinnegan blazing as he unleashed a gravity manipulation technique that momentarily pinned Momoshiki in place. "Now," Sasuke called. From multiple directions, specially prepared sealing tags launched toward Momoshiki, not to contain him, but to disrupt his chakra network at the precise moment the dampening effect was wearing off. The timing was critical, designed to create interference during the restoration process and potentially extend their advantage. Some of the tags connected, adhering to Momoshiki's pale skin and flaring with sealing energy. The Otsutsuki's expression contorted with genuine discomfort as the carefully calibrated formulas interfered with his recovering abilities. "Enough of this farce," he snarled, his refined demeanor cracking under pressure. "Kinshiki, protocol ascension." Across the battlefield, the massive guardian disengaged from his opponents with sudden urgency, moving to position himself beside his master. Without hesitation, Kinshiki dropped to one knee, head bowed in submissive offering. "My power is yours, Lord Momoshiki," he intoned formally, as was always intended. Naruto recognized the ritual immediately from Urashiki's memories. "Stop them," he commanded urgently. "They're initiating consumption." The allied forces responded instantly, converging on the Otsutsuki pair with everything at their disposal, but they were seconds too late. Momoshiki placed his palm on Kinshiki's bowed head, and a terrible transformation began. The guardian's massive form seeming to liquefy, his physical substance breaking down into pure chakra that Momoshiki absorbed with evident relish. The process lasted only moments, but its brutality left even hardened shinobi momentarily stunned. When it concluded, Momoshiki stood alone, transformed by his guardian's sacrifice. His delicate features had hardened, his pale skin now marked with Kinshiki's red patterns. Most significantly, a Rinnegan had manifested in each palm, pulsing with ominous power. Ah, he sighed, satisfaction evident in his voice. Much better. Without warning, he slammed his palms together, the twin Rinnegan blazing with power. A massive shockwave erupted outward, shattering the containment barriers and sending shinobi flying in all directions. Unlike his previous attacks, this one carried raw destructive force that transformed the battlefield, instantly cracking the valley floor and creating fissures that spread toward the surrounding cliffs. Phase 3. Naruto commanded through the communication network, even as he stabilized himself against the devastating attack. Full defensive posture. The Allied forces regrouped with remarkable discipline, shifting to their tertiary strategy designed for confronting Momoshiki at full power. Medical teams rushed to assist those injured in the initial shockwave, while long-range support units repositioned to more defensible locations. Did you truly believe your primitive preparations would be sufficient? Momoshiki called out, his voice now carrying dual tones, his own melodious cadence overlaid with Kinshiki's deeper resonance. I have harvested worlds far more advanced than this one. Civilizations whose technology would seem like magic to your limited understanding. Naruto and Sasuke regrouped at the center of the valley, assessing the transformed threat with practiced tactical analysis. His power has approximately doubled, Naruto observed quietly, but the consumption was rushed, forced by our strategy rather than occurring naturally. The integration is incomplete. Sasuke nodded. Weaknesses at the junction points. His chakra network shows instabilities where Kinshiki's power meets his own. This observation confirmed what Naruto had sensed through the karma's perception. Momoshiki's hasty absorption of Kinshiki had created vulnerabilities that wouldn't exist in a properly executed consumption ritual. Hinata, Neji, Naruto called through the communication seal. Target the junction points in his chakra network, particularly at the shoulders and center mass. Understood, came Hinata's focused reply. Momoshiki watched these preparations with amused contempt. Strategizing again. How entertaining. He raised his hands, the Rinnegan in each palm beginning to glow ominously. Perhaps I should demonstrate what true power looks like. The air around him distorted as massive amounts of chakra gathered, drawing energy not just from his own reserves but from the very environment. Plants withered, water evaporated, and even the stone beneath his feet began to crack as he extracted their latent energy. Planetary devastation. Sasuke identified the technique immediately, recognizing the gravitational distortion patterns, but on a scale I've never encountered. Everyone clear the valley floor. Naruto commanded urgently. Barrier teams, maximum reinforcement. As Allied forces scrambled to higher ground, Momoshiki completed his technique. The Rinnegan in his palms pulsed in synchronized rhythm, and the center of the valley began to rise, not just loose debris, but a massive section of earth tearing free from the ground in a perfect sphere nearly 100 meters in diameter. Behold, Momoshiki announced with theatrical flair, the beginning of your world's harvest. With a casual gesture, he sent the Earth sphere hurtling toward the northern ridge where a significant portion of the Allied forces had repositioned. The massive projectile moved with devastating speed, threatening to obliterate hundreds of shinobi in a single impact. Naruto reacted instinctively, the karma patterns spreading further across his body as he channeled extraordinary power. His right hand extended toward the approaching sphere, and the air between them seemed to ripple and distort. Otsutsuki art. Spatial negation, he intoned, drawing on knowledge embedded deep within the karma. The Earth sphere shuddered in mid-flight, then simply disappeared, not destroyed or deflected, but removed from this dimensional plane entirely. The absence of impact was almost more shocking than the attack itself, creating a moment of stunned silence across the battlefield. Momoshiki's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to genuine surprise. You've accessed that level of karma integration already? For the first time, he regarded Naruto with something approaching respect. Perhaps you're more than just an interesting anomaly after all. The technique had taken a significant toll, however. Naruto's breathing had become labored, and the karma patterns across his body pulsed with painful intensity as the seal responded to such extensive use of Otsutsuki abilities. Sensing his momentary vulnerability, Momoshiki launched forward with blinding speed, Rinnegan-empowered fists aimed directly at Naruto's chest. Let's see how much of Urashiki's power you can truly handle, vessel. Before the attack could connect, Sasuke intercepted, his sword wreathed in lightning chakra that wasn't designed to damage but to disrupt, specifically calibrated to interfere with the junction points they had identified in Momoshiki's hastily integrated form. The Otsutsuki hissed in pain as the blade struck his shoulder, momentarily destabilizing the connection between his original chakra and Kinshiki's absorbed power. Taking advantage of the opening, Hinata and Neji appeared on either side, their gentle fist strikes targeting the same vulnerable junctions with precise coordination. Insignificant insects. Momoshiki snarled, his refined demeanor crumbling further as he unleashed a radial pulse of energy that forced his attackers back. I will absorb your chakra down to the last drop. Despite his arrogant declaration, visible strain had appeared on his face, evidence that the allied force's strategy was having effect. The rushed consumption of Kinshiki, combined with the targeted attacks on the integration points, was creating instabilities in his power structure that couldn't be easily dismissed. Naruto had recovered enough to re-engage, the pain from the karma's expansion now controlled through sheer force of will. "You've miscalculated, Momoshiki," he stated calmly, moving to stand beside Sasuke once more. "This world isn't like the others you've harvested. We've evolved beyond your expectations." "Evolved?" Momoshiki scoffed, though the effect was somewhat undermined by the visible strain in his posture. "You're merely unusually resourceful livestock, nothing more." Rather than arguing further, Naruto and Sasuke exchanged a brief glance, a silent communication born of years fighting both against and alongside each other. Without further prompting, they moved in perfect synchronization, activating the combined technique they had developed specifically for this confrontation. Sasuke's Rinnegan blazed with power as he manipulated gravitational forces, temporarily anchoring Momoshiki to a single position despite the Otsutsuki's attempts to break free. Simultaneously, Naruto channeled both his own chakra and carefully controlled karma energy into a modified version of the Rasengan, one incorporating elements that would specifically target the unstable junctions in Momoshiki's integrated form. "Impossible," Momoshiki growled, struggling against the gravitational binding. "No primitive technique should be able to restrain me." "This isn't just our power," Naruto replied as the specialized Rasengan grew in his palm, swirling with complex patterns of normal chakra interwoven with the distinctive blue-white energy of the karma. "It's the culmination of everything our world has learned through countless battles and sacrifices." The attack struck with devastating precision, connecting directly with Momoshiki's chest, where the primary junction point between his original form and Kinshiki's absorbed power was located. The effect was immediate and dramatic rather than conventional damage. The technique created a cascading disruption throughout Momoshiki's chakra network, temporarily forcing the hastily integrated powers to destabilize and separate. The Otsutsuki's agonized cry echoed throughout the valley as visible fractures appeared across his form, not physical cracks, but ruptures in the very energy that constituted his transformed state. For a critical moment, he was truly vulnerable. "All units, convergent attack pattern," Naruto commanded through the communication network. "Maximum deployment." Across the battlefield, the allied shinobi forces responded with perfect coordination. From every direction, specialized techniques targeted the destabilized Otsutsuki, each designed to exploit specific weaknesses in his compromised state. Earth techniques from Iwa shinobi restricted his movement further, while Kumo's lightning users delivered precisely calibrated shocks to the disrupted chakra pathways. Kiri's water specialists created pressure differentials that complicated his energy manipulation, and Suna's wind techniques dispersed his attempts to gather environmental chakra. At the center of this convergent assault, Naruto and Sasuke maintained their primary engagement, preventing Momoshiki from regaining his balance or reforming his integrated state. For the first time since the battle began, genuine fear flickered across the Otsutsuki's aristocratic features. "This cannot be," he gasped between attacks, his previously melodious voice now ragged. "Mere humans cannot challenge an Otsutsuki noble." "Your arrogance is your weakness," Sasuke stated flatly, unleashing another precisely targeted attack against a critical junction point. "You underestimated this world's capability to defend itself." For a moment, it seemed victory was within their grasp. Momoshiki's destabilization had progressed to a critical point, his ability to maintain Kinshiki's absorbed power failing under the relentless, coordinated assault. Then, abruptly, his expression shifted from pained desperation to cold calculation. If I cannot harvest this world conventionally, he declared, the Rinnegan in his palms suddenly pulsing with renewed intensity, then I shall simply burn it clean and start anew. Before anyone could react, Momoshiki slammed his palms together, creating a focal point of energy so dense it bent light around itself. The technique was unlike anything they had prepared for, not an attack or defensive measure, but something far more dangerous. Dimensional collapse, Naruto identified with alarm, recognizing the signature from Urashiki's memories. He's attempting to fracture the dimensional boundary around the entire region. The implications were immediately clear to the command team. Such a technique wouldn't just destroy the battlefield, it would create a cascading failure that could potentially render hundreds of square kilometers uninhabitable, twisting the very fabric of space-time into an unstable maze of fractured reality. Can we stop it? Tsunade demanded through the communication network, her voice tense but controlled. Naruto assessed the rapidly developing technique with both his natural senses and the karma's advanced perception. Not conventionally, he replied grimly. This is Otsutsuki high-level dimensional manipulation. The energy between Momoshiki's palms continued to intensify, reality itself beginning to warp visibly around the focal point. Small objects, pebbles, leaves, even droplets of water began to distort and stretch toward the anomaly as space-time fabric started to tear. I'll stabilize it with the Rinnegan, Sasuke declared, already moving to intercept. My space-time techniques can counter the worst effects. Not alone, Naruto countermanded. The scale is too vast. You'd burn out your eyes before containing a tenth of the disruption. A heavy silence fell across the command network as the implications became clear. There was only one viable option, and everyone recognized it simultaneously. The karma contingency, Kakashi stated, giving voice to what they all realized. It's our only chance. Naruto nodded grimly. The contingency he had described to his closest allies before the battle, temporarily allowing Urashiki's data greater influence to access higher-level Otsutsuki abilities. The risk was substantial, but the alternative was unthinkable. I need 3 minutes of complete coverage, he stated with calm precision. Sasuke, stabilize the immediate area around Momoshiki. Everyone else, defensive perimeter to buy us time. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the allied forces moved with grim determination. Sasuke positioned himself between Naruto and Momoshiki, Rinnegan blazing as he established localized space-time anchors to slow the dimensional fracturing process. Around them, elite shinobi formed protective formations, prepared to intercept any interference. Are you certain about this? Hinata asked quietly, moving to Naruto's side as he began the necessary preparations. Her evolved Byakugan could perceive the risks more clearly than most. The strain this would place on his already taxed system, the danger of losing himself to Urashiki's influence. No choice, Naruto replied simply, meeting her concerned gaze with steady resolve. But I won't lose myself. I have too many anchors to this world. He touched the bracelet she had given him, the chakra-harmonizing jewelry now pulsing with increased intensity as the karma patterns spread further across his body. The simple gesture carried profound meaning that transcended their current crisis. Without further hesitation, Naruto assumed a meditative position, fingers forming a complex seal not taught in any shinobi academy. The karma patterns across his skin began to glow with blinding intensity, the geometric shapes seeming to shift and realign themselves into more complex configurations. Karma liberation. Inner sanctum access, he intoned, voice resonating with unusual harmonics as he deliberately removed the barriers he had maintained between his consciousness and the deeper levels of Urashiki's embedded data. The effect was immediate and visually dramatic. The black markings of the karma spread rapidly across his entire body, not just covering his skin but seeming to sink beneath it, transforming his very cellular structure. His right eye completed its transformation into the Otsutsuki pattern, while his left began to shift as well, the blue iris taking on the same compass-like appearance but with inverted coloration. Around him, the air shimmered with visible distortion as his chakra signature underwent a fundamental change, not simply growing stronger, but shifting into frequencies that existed partially outside conventional dimensional parameters. Those with sensory abilities fell back instinctively, overwhelmed by the sudden expansion of presence. Remarkable, Momoshiki commented despite his precarious situation, genuine scientific interest briefly overriding his desperation. You've accessed deeper integration levels than should be possible without complete personality override. Naruto rose to his feet, movement unnaturally smooth and precise. When he spoke, his voice carried subtle harmonics that hadn't been present before, his own tenor overlaid with alien frequencies that seemed to resonate directly with the listener's chakra rather than merely their auditory senses. "You mistake the nature of our integration, Momoshiki," he stated, approaching the dimensional anomaly with measured steps. "This is not subjugation or replacement, but synthesis. Urashiki's knowledge, my will." Without further explanation, he extended both hands toward the growing space-time rupture. The air between his palms and the anomaly warped and distorted, as if two opposing forces were meeting in structured opposition rather than chaotic conflict. Otsutsuki art. Dimensional harmonization, Naruto intoned, drawing on knowledge so deeply embedded in the karma that accessing it had required this dangerous level of integration. The effect was not immediately visible to conventional perception, but those with advanced visual abilities, Sasuke's Rinnegan, Hinata's evolving Tenseigan, the Byakugan users among the allied forces, could see what was happening. Rather than directly opposing Momoshiki's destructive technique, Naruto was creating a complex dimensional lattice around it, a structure of interwoven space-time anchors that gradually contained and redirected the rupturing energies. "Impossible," Momoshiki hissed, redoubling his efforts to complete the dimensional collapse. "No vessel should be capable of this level of manipulation without full conversion." "As I said," Naruto replied, voice steady despite the enormous strain evident in his posture, "you mistake the nature of our relationship. The karma is a tool, not my master." The contest of wills and techniques continued for long, tense moments, Momoshiki pouring increasingly desperate energy into his destructive technique, Naruto methodically containing and redirecting it through the dimensional lattice he had constructed. Around them, the allied forces maintained their protective formations, preventing interference while simultaneously preparing for whatever outcome might emerge. Gradually, the balance shifted. Momoshiki's technique began to falter as the hastily absorbed power from Kinshiki destabilized further under the strain of maintaining such an advanced ability. Conversely, Naruto's control grew more refined as he adapted to the deeper level of karma integration, his natural talent for improvisational technique combining with Urashiki's embedded knowledge to create solutions unique to this specific challenge. "You cannot win this contest, Momoshiki," Naruto stated, the dual-toned resonance of his voice carrying across the battlefield. "Withdraw the technique and surrender." Surrender? The Otsutsuki noble's aristocratic features contorted with rage and disbelief. To lesser beings? Never? With a final, desperate surge, Momoshiki poured everything he had into the dimensional collapse, his own reserves, Kinshiki's absorbed power, and chakra forcibly extracted from the environment around him. The space-time anomaly pulsed with blinding intensity, threatening to overwhelm even Naruto's advanced containment lattice. For a critical moment, the outcome hung in perfect balance, two opposed forces of nearly equal magnitude pushing against each other at the edge of dimensional stability. Then, with perfect timing born of their long partnership, Sasuke intervened. Using his Rinnegan's unique space-time abilities, he created a localized pocket dimension directly behind Momoshiki, not to contain the Otsutsuki himself, but to selectively drain away a portion of the energy he was channeling into the collapse technique. It wasn't much, perhaps 5% of the total power, but in that precisely balanced contest, it was enough to tip the scales. The dimensional lattice Naruto had constructed suddenly gained predominance, enclosing the collapsing anomaly in layers of stabilizing patterns. With methodical precision, he began compressing the contained energy, forcing it into an increasingly smaller volume. "What are you doing?" Momoshiki demanded, alarm replacing confidence as he felt control of his technique slipping away. "Returning your gift," Naruto replied simply. With a final series of precise manipulations, he compressed the entire dimensional anomaly into a sphere no larger than a marble, then flicked it directly at Momoshiki's chest. The Otsutsuki attempted to dodge, but Sasuke's space-time anchors restricted his movement just enough to ensure the compressed energy made contact. The result was both elegant and devastating. Rather than an explosive release, the compressed dimensional energy created a localized implosion centered on Momoshiki himself. The Otsutsuki was not destroyed, such beings couldn't be eliminated so easily, but he was forcibly ejected from their dimensional plane, dragged back through the very rupture he had attempted to create. His final expression, visible for just an instant before dimensional translation completed, was one of utter disbelief, aristocratic features frozen in the realization that he had been defeated not by raw power, but by the innovative application of his own technique against him. Then he was gone, the dimensional distortion collapsing in on itself with a sound like thunder heard underwater. Where Momoshiki had stood, only a small crater remained. The stone at its center crystallized into patterns reminiscent of frozen lightning. A profound silence fell across the battlefield as Allied forces processed what had just occurred. Momoshiki, an Otsutsuki noble with power comparable to Kaguya, had been defeated. Not destroyed, but forcibly removed from their world and severely weakened in the process. The victory had come at significant cost, however. Naruto remained standing at the center of the containment lattice he had created, but visible strain showed in every aspect of his being. The karma patterns across his body pulsed with painful intensity, and his dual-colored eyes flickered between their Otsutsuki configuration and his natural blue. Naruto? Sasuke approached cautiously, Rinnegan still active as he assessed his friend's condition. Are you in control? For a moment, Naruto didn't respond, his expression unnaturally still as internal processes beyond ordinary perception unfolded within him. Then, gradually, his features softened into something more recognizably his own. Yes, he confirmed, voice still carrying those subtle alien harmonics but distinctly his in cadence and tone. But the integration has accelerated significantly. Before further discussion could occur, Naruto suddenly staggered, the enormous strain of maintaining such advanced techniques finally catching up to him. Hinata and Sakura reached him simultaneously, medical training and personal concern driving their immediate response. His chakra network is undergoing rapid reconfiguration, Hinata reported, her evolved Byakugan providing detailed assessment. The karma patterns have reached deeper tissue layers than before. Sakura's hands glowed with diagnostic chakra as she conducted her own examination. Cellular restructuring has accelerated beyond safe parameters. We need to stabilize him immediately. Around them, the Allied forces maintained their defensive positions despite Momoshiki's departure. Experience had taught them that apparent victory could quickly transform into renewed threat where Otsutsuki were concerned. Secure the battlefield, Kakashi ordered through the communication network. Sensor teams, continuous monitoring for dimensional anomalies. Medical division, prepare for casualties. Primary team, escort Naruto to the forward medical station. As the Allied forces shifted to post-battle protocols with practiced efficiency, Sasuke, Hinata, and Sakura carefully moved Naruto toward the cliffside where the advanced medical unit had been established. Despite his weakened state, he remained conscious, though his attention seemed divided between their physical surroundings and something only he could perceive. The dimensional fabric is stabilizing, he reported softly as they reached the medical station. Momoshiki was forcibly ejected to at least 3-dimensional planes removed from our own. It will take him significant time to recover and navigate back. How much time? Sasuke asked practically. Months at minimum, Naruto replied. Possibly years, depending on the damage to his integrated form. This assessment brought visible relief to the gathered shinobi. Not a permanent victory, perhaps, but a substantial reprieve that would allow for further preparation and strengthening of their defenses. Inside the medical station, Tsunade herself waited, having monitored the battle from the command center. Her experienced eyes immediately assessed Naruto's condition with clinical precision. Get him on the stabilization platform, she ordered, already preparing specialized sealing tags designed to moderate chakra fluctuations. Sakura, prepare the cellular stabilization formula. Hinata, maintain monitoring of his chakra network and report any fluctuations. As they worked with practiced coordination, Naruto's condition temporarily stabilized. The violent pulsing of the karma patterns across his skin subsided to a steady glow, and his eyes gradually returned to their natural blue, though faint traces of the Otsutsuki pattern remained visible when caught in certain light. The integration has progressed beyond our initial projections, Tsunade observed grimly after completing her examination. The karma has extended into approximately 60% of your cellular structure, up from the 35% we measured before the battle. Is there any way to slow the process? Sakura asked, concern evident beneath her professional demeanor. Tsunade shook her head. Not with our current understanding of the seal's mechanics. The best we can do is manage the symptoms and support his system through the transition. Throughout this discussion, Naruto remained unusually quiet, his attention seemingly turned inward. When he finally spoke, his voice had regained more of its natural quality, though subtle harmonics still lingered at the edges. The accelerated integration isn't unexpected, he said. Accessing deeper levels of the karma was always going to have consequences. But it's not proceeding as Momoshiki would recognize. Explain. Sasuke prompted, standing near the entrance with his arms crossed, Rinnegan still activated as he monitored the dimensional stability around them. Standard karma integration is unidirectional. The vessel's identity gradually replaced by the Otsutsuki's, Naruto explained. What's happening here is more synergistic. Urashiki's data is integrating with my system, but not overriding my identity. Is that sustainable? Tsunade asked directly, her medical mind immediately grasping the implications. Unknown, Naruto admitted. There's no precedent for this specific integration pattern. But the Nine Tails Kurama is actively participating in the process, creating a trilateral interaction that seems to be maintaining equilibrium. As if in response to this statement, the whisker marks on Naruto's cheeks darkened momentarily, accompanied by a brief flare of the familiar red chakra associated with the Nine Tails. The interaction between this energy and the karma's blue-white power created a fascinating visual effect, like oil and water refusing to mix while simultaneously occupying the same space. Fascinating, Tsunade murmured, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her medical concern. 3 distinct chakra signatures coexisting in a single system without destroying it. The strain remains significant, Hinata observed, her evolved Byakugan perceiving details others missed, particularly at the junction points where the different energies interface. Naruto nodded agreement. I'll need time to stabilize the integration. Days, possibly weeks of careful meditation and chakra control exercises. You'll have it, Tsunade assured him. The victory today has earned us a respite. Use it wisely. As the medical team continued their work, reports flowed in from across the battlefield. Casualties had been remarkably light given the scale of the confrontation, a testament to the effectiveness of their preparation and strategy. Structural damage to the Valley of the End was substantial but contained, and the dimensional fabric showed signs of natural repair now that the active disruption had ceased. The dimensional anchor fragments have been collected, Kakashi reported, entering the medical station after overseeing the battlefield security protocols. Our sensor teams confirm no residual energy signatures that might allow tracking or remote observation. Good, Naruto acknowledged. Destroy them completely. The technology is too advanced for our current level of understanding, and too dangerous if misused. Kakashi nodded, then turned his attention to Naruto's condition. The karma integration, is it still? You in there? The question was direct but necessary, voiced by someone who had seen too many comrades lost to various forms of possession or control throughout his career. Naruto met his former teacher's gaze steadily. Still me, Kakashi-sensei, he confirmed with a hint of his old smile. Just, more than before. Additional knowledge, expanded perspective, but my core identity remains intact. Something in his voice, perhaps the familiar cadence despite the subtle harmonic undertones, seemed to reassure Kakashi, who nodded acceptance of this assessment. The Allied Forces leadership is convening for a preliminary debrief in 1 hour, he informed them. Can you participate, or should I relay your report? Naruto glanced at Tsunade, who considered his condition before responding. Limited participation only, she decided. 10 minutes maximum, then back to stabilization protocols. With arrangements made for the debrief, the medical team continued their work, gradually bringing Naruto's condition under greater control. The violent fluctuations in the karma patterns subsided further, settling into a steady state that, while still expanded beyond previous levels, no longer threatened immediate destabilization. You should rest, Hinata advised softly as the others focused on preparing for the upcoming meeting. She remained at his side, one hand gently resting on his arm where her chakra helped moderate the karma's energy fluctuations. Soon, Naruto agreed, his voice equally quiet. Then, meeting her concerned gaze directly, he added, "Thank you for the bracelet. It provided crucial stability during the deeper integration. Without it, I might have lost more of myself to Urashiki's influence." Hinata smiled, genuine but tinged with lingering concern. "I'm glad it helped. Though I admit, watching you access that level of the karma was frightening. For a moment, your chakra signature became almost unrecognizable." "Not entirely," he corrected gently. "There was always a core that remained distinctly mine. A foundation the alien energies couldn't penetrate." His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on his arm. The connections that anchor me to this world are stronger than any Otsutsuki data download. The simple statement carried profound meaning that transcended their current circumstances. Before Hinata could respond, however, Ino entered the medical station, her usual confident demeanor slightly subdued as she took in Naruto's condition. Sensor Division reports complete dimensional stabilization, she announced professionally. Then, dropping the formal tone, she approached Naruto's bedside. You look terrible, she observed candidly. A genuine laugh escaped him, perhaps the most normal sound he had made since the deeper integration. Always appreciated for your honesty, Ino. She smiled, though worry remained evident in her eyes. Did my mind barrier capsules help at all? Tremendously, he confirmed. They prevented Momoshiki from attempting mental infiltration during the confrontation. One less vulnerability to defend against. Satisfaction briefly replaced concern in her expression. Good. I'd hate to think all those rare ingredients went to waste. As preparations for the leadership debrief continued around them, Naruto found himself experiencing an unusual sense of temporal displacement, as if simultaneously perceiving the immediate moment and glimpsing potential futures branching from it. The sensation wasn't entirely unfamiliar. The deeper karma integration had enhanced certain perceptive abilities beyond their previous limitations. You're seeing possibilities, aren't you? Hinata asked perceptively, her evolved Byakugan detecting subtle shifts in his chakra patterns associated with the expanded awareness. Yes, he acknowledged, impressed by her insight. Not with perfect clarity, but impressions. Potential paths depending on choices made now. And what do you see? Ino asked, curiosity overriding protocol as she joined their conversation. Naruto considered how to articulate the complex perceptions flowing through his consciousness. I see. Reconstruction. Adaptation. Our world integrating the knowledge gained from this encounter rather than being consumed by it. Something in his phrasing seemed to resonate with both Kunoichi, each processing the statement in relation to their own understanding of his transformation. Integration rather than consumption, Hinata repeated thoughtfully. That seems to be the fundamental difference between your path and typical Otsutsuki methods. The difference that matters most, Ino agreed with unexpected solemnity. Then, reverting to her more typical directness, she added, well, that and not being a homicidal alien aristocrat with a god complex. The observation broke the philosophical tension, drawing smiles from both Naruto and Hinata. This moment of levity was interrupted, however, as Sasuke returned to inform them that the leadership meeting was ready to begin. I'll escort him, Sasuke stated, his tone leaving little room for argument. Despite Hinata and Ino's visible reluctance to leave Naruto's side, they recognized the necessity of the debrief and stepped back to allow Sasuke to assist him from the medical platform. As they departed, both Kunoichi exchanged a brief glance that contained complex recognition of their shared concern for him, despite whatever personal competition might exist between them. The leadership debrief was held in a secure tent erected near the command post, with representatives from each of the 5 great nations present. When Naruto entered, supported partially by Sasuke though making evident effort to walk under his own power, a hush fell over the assembled leaders. His appearance had continued to evolve in subtle ways since the battle's conclusion. The karma patterns, while no longer pulsing painfully, had settled into a configuration that covered approximately half his visible skin, the geometric shapes more complex and refined than their earlier manifestation. His eyes remained primarily their natural blue, but caught the light differently now, occasionally reflecting patterns reminiscent of the Otsutsuki visual structure. Uzumaki Naruto, the Raikage acknowledged formally, his usual gruffness tempered with something approaching respect. Your strategy proved effective. The allied forces owe you their gratitude. The victory belongs to everyone who participated, Naruto replied diplomatically. Each division executed their role with precision that made the overall strategy possible. This modest deflection seemed to satisfy the assembled leaders, who proceeded to discuss the immediate aftermath and security protocols with efficient focus. Naruto participated as needed, providing insights on dimensional stability and potential lingering threats, while Sasuke contributed observations from his Rinnegan's unique perspective. As the 10-minute limit Tsunade had imposed approached, Gaara, who had been characteristically quiet throughout the proceedings, finally addressed the topic everyone had been carefully avoiding. Your condition, Naruto, the Kazekage said directly, his pale green eyes assessing his friend with calm concern. Has the accelerated karma integration changed your allegiances or perspectives regarding our world? The blunt question created momentary tension among the assembled leaders, but Naruto appreciated the directness. Gaara, who had experienced his own struggles with containing a powerful entity that influenced his perception, understood better than most the legitimate concern behind the inquiry. My core values and loyalties remain unchanged, Naruto answered with equal directness. The karma provides access to Otsutsuki knowledge and abilities, but my identity, who I am and what I stand for, remains fundamentally my own. After a brief pause, he added, though I acknowledge that my perspective has expanded. I see connections and possibilities I couldn't perceive before. And these expanded perspectives, Onoki, the Tsuchikage, inquired carefully, how do they influence your view of the shinobi world's current political structure? The deeper question was clear: was the enhanced power and perception making Naruto harbor ambitions beyond the established order? The concern wasn't entirely unreasonable, given the history of how power often corrupted those who wielded it. I see greater potential for genuine cooperation rather than merely strategic alliances, Naruto replied thoughtfully. The Otsutsuki threat transcends our traditional boundaries. In facing it together, we've demonstrated capabilities that none of our nations could achieve individually. This response seemed to satisfy most of the leaders, though some appeared to reserve judgment on its longer-term implications. Before further questions could be posed, Tsunade intervened, reminding everyone of the medical limitations on Naruto's participation. We will continue this discussion after his condition has stabilized, she stated firmly. For now, the immediate threat has been addressed, and securing our world against future incursions must be our priority. With final arrangements made for coordinating the Allied forces' withdrawal and the establishment of permanent monitoring systems around the battlefield, the meeting concluded. As Sasuke prepared to escort Naruto back to the medical station, the Raikage approached them directly. Uzumaki, he said, his imposing figure standing at its full height, your actions today have earned my respect. Few would have risked what you did to protect not just their own village, but all our nations. Coming from the typically critical and suspicious Raikage, this acknowledgement carried significant weight. Naruto recognized it with a respectful nod, strength of will allowing him to stand straighter despite his physical condition. Thank you, Raikage-sama. Unity was our greatest strength today and will remain so in facing whatever challenges lie ahead. As they departed the meeting, the sun had begun to set over the Valley of the End, casting long shadows across the altered landscape. Evidence of the intense battle remained visible everywhere: cracked earth, scorched vegetation, the occasional crystallized formation where dimensional energies had briefly intersected with physical matter. You handled that well, Sasuke observed as they made their way back toward the medical station. They're concerned about your transformation, but not hostile to it. Yet, Naruto amended realistically. As the integration continues to progress, the concern will grow proportionally. Sasuke nodded, acknowledging the accurate assessment. How much further will it progress? The integration. The question addressed the fundamental unknown that Naruto himself had been contemplating since the battle's conclusion. After a moment's consideration, he provided the most honest answer he could. I don't know precisely. Based on current patterns, physical integration will likely plateau at around 70 to 80%. But the more significant aspect is the cognitive integration, how Urashiki's knowledge and perspectives interweave with my own consciousness. And the risk of his personality attempting to assert control. Sasuke pressed, ever practical in assessing potential threats. Diminishing, Naruto replied with reasonable confidence. The trilateral balance between my core identity, Kurama's influence, and Urashiki's data appears to be establishing a stable equilibrium. Less a competition for dominance and more a negotiated coexistence. They had reached the medical station, where Tsunade awaited with an expression that suggested she had expected them to return sooner. Before entering, Naruto paused, turning to face his friend directly. There's something else, he said, voice lowered for privacy. Something I glimpsed during the deeper integration that you should know about. Sasuke's mismatched eyes focused with immediate attention. What? The Otsutsuki clan hierarchy extends far beyond Momoshiki and Kinshiki. There are others more powerful, more ancient, who oversee their world harvesting operations from a dimension removed from conventional space-time. This information visibly concerns Sasuke, whose strategic mind immediately grasped the implications, and with Momoshiki's defeat. They may take greater interest in our world, Naruto confirmed grimly. Not immediately, their perception of time differs from ours, but eventually. Today's victory, while significant, may have placed us more firmly on their observation list. The two strongest shinobi in the world shared a moment of silent understanding. The battle they had won was perhaps only the first in a longer conflict whose full dimensions they were just beginning to perceive. Then we use the time we've gained wisely, Sasuke concluded pragmatically. Strengthen our defenses, expand our understanding of Otsutsuki weaknesses, prepare for more significant confrontations. Naruto nodded agreement. My thoughts exactly. With this sobering exchange complete, they entered the medical station where Tsunade immediately directed Naruto back to the stabilization platform, displeasure at his extended absence evident in her expression but tempered with understanding of its necessity. The integration fluctuations have settled into a more predictable pattern, she informed him as she conducted a fresh examination. With proper management techniques, you should be able to return to Konoha tomorrow for more comprehensive treatment at the main hospital. Thank you, Naruto replied sincerely, for everything you've done today for me and for the Allied forces. Something in his tone, a depth of perception that transcended mere gratitude, caught Tsunade's attention. She paused in her examination, studying him with experienced eyes that had witnessed countless transformations throughout her long career. You really are still you, aren't you? She observed quietly. Despite everything that's changed, at your core still the same stubborn, compassionate brat who refused to give up on anything he believed in. Naruto smiled, the expression somehow both familiar and altered by the subtle changes to his features. Some things remain constant, regardless of power or perspective. That's the foundation everything else builds upon. As night fell fully over the battlefield, the Allied shinobi forces continued their organized withdrawal and security protocols. Monitoring systems were established at strategic points throughout the valley, designed to provide early warning of any dimensional disturbances that might signal Momoshiki's unlikely but possible return. In the medical station, Naruto finally allowed himself to rest, entering a meditative state that would help stabilize the ongoing integration process. The karma patterns across his skin settled into a steady, subtle glow as his consciousness turned inward, navigating the complex intersection of energies and identities now coexisting within his being. The victory had been hard-won, the cost significant but not devastating, and while the future held uncertain challenges, the immediate threat had been addressed with a unity and strategic effectiveness that gave reason for genuine optimism. As Naruto's consciousness drifted between meditative awareness and true rest, one certainty remained clear amidst the complex possibilities unfolding before him. Whatever he was becoming through this unprecedented integration, the core of who he was, his values, his bonds, his fundamental identity would remain the foundation upon which everything else was built. Not replacement, but evolution. Not subjugation, but synthesis. A path uniquely his own, forged at the intersection of human determination and cosmic power. 3 days after the battle at the Valley of the End, Naruto stood on the balcony of his hospital room in Konoha, watching the daily activities of the village with newfound perception. His condition had stabilized significantly under Tsunade's specialized treatment protocol, allowing him to be transferred from the field medical station to the more comprehensive facilities of Konoha Hospital. The karma integration had settled into a new equilibrium, the geometric patterns now covering approximately 65% of his body but no longer actively spreading. His eyes had retained small hints of the Otsutsuki structure. Faint patterns visible in the blue irises when caught in certain light, but otherwise appeared normal to casual observation. More significant than the physical changes, however, was the internal transformation, the expanded awareness and perception that continued to develop as his consciousness adapted to the integrated knowledge. He could perceive chakra flows and dimensional currents invisible to normal senses, recognize patterns and connections that existed beneath the surface of ordinary reality. A knock at the door interrupted his contemplation. "Enter," he called, turning from the balcony as Shikamaru Nara stepped into the room. "The Hokage sent me to check if you're up for visitors," Shikamaru explained, his shrewd eyes quickly assessing Naruto's condition. "Several people have been camping in the waiting area since dawn, apparently." "I can imagine," Naruto replied with a small smile. "Yes, I'm feeling much more stable today. Visitors would be welcome." Shikamaru nodded, then hesitated briefly before adding, "The initial intelligence assessment of the battle has been completed. The strategic advantages gained from our encounter with the Otsutsuki are substantial. I'd like to review the report when it's finalized," Naruto requested. "Already arranged," Shikamaru confirmed. Tsunade-sama has authorized your full access to all analytical materials once you're medically cleared. With characteristic directness, he then asked, how much of you is still you? The blunt question didn't offend Naruto, who had expected such inquiries from his perceptive friend. My core identity remains intact, he answered honestly. The integration has expanded my perception and knowledge base substantially, but hasn't fundamentally altered who I am or what I value. Shikamaru studied him for a moment longer before nodding acceptance. Good. The village needs Naruto Uzumaki, not some Otsutsuki replacement wearing his face. With that characteristically frank assessment, he moved toward the door. I'll send in your first visitors. Try not to overexert yourself. Tsunade-sama was quite explicit about the consequences if you ignore medical guidance. Minutes later, the door reopened to admit Hinata and Hanabi Hyuga. The younger sister hung back slightly, her Byakugan activated as she studied Naruto's transformed chakra network with undisguised fascination, while Hinata approached more directly, her evolved eyes perceiving even deeper layers of his condition. Your integration has stabilized, she observed, relief evident in her voice. The junction points between the different chakra types are forming proper harmonics now. Thanks in large part to your bracelet, Naruto acknowledged, indicating the chakra-harmonizing jewelry that remained on his wrist. The medical team was quite impressed by its effectiveness. Tsunade-sama has been studying its construction principles for potential applications in other chakra-related treatments. Hanabi, overcoming her initial hesitation, moved closer to examine the karma patterns visible on Naruto's exposed skin. The geometric structure has evolved, she noted with analytical precision. The patterns are more complex than before the battle. Yes, Naruto confirmed. The deeper integration accessed more advanced aspects of the karma's data structure. The patterns reflect that progression. Does it hurt? Hanabi asked directly, her youthful curiosity overriding formal protocol. Not anymore, Naruto replied with a reassuring smile. The initial integration phases were quite painful, but the current equilibrium is stable and comfortable. Hinata approached the balcony where Naruto had been standing, her gaze taking in the village spread out below. You perceive it differently now, don't you? She asked perceptively. Not just visually, but on deeper levels. Naruto joined her at the railing, impressed as always by her intuitive understanding of his experience. Yes. I can see chakra flows throughout the village, how they connect, interact, form patterns that reveal relationships and emotional states. The dimensional fabric that intersects with our physical reality is also visible now, showing how certain locations serve as natural focal points for energy convergence. Like seeing a world within the world we know, Hinata observed thoughtfully. Exactly, he agreed, appreciating her ability to conceptualize these complex perceptions. Their moment of connection was interrupted as the door opened again, admitting Sakura, who entered carrying medical charts and monitoring equipment. Time for your hourly checkup, she announced professionally, though her expression softened upon seeing the Hyuga sisters. Hinata, Hanabi, good to see you. I hope you don't mind a brief interruption. Not at all, Hinata replied graciously. Hanabi was curious about Naruto's condition, and I wanted to see how the chakra harmonization was progressing. As Sakura began her examination, Hanabi watched with evident interest in the medical protocols being applied to Naruto's unique condition. The young Hyuga had recently begun cross-training in medical techniques to complement her combat abilities, an innovative combination that had initially raised eyebrows among the more traditional clan members. The cellular restructuring has stabilized at 68% integration, Sakura reported after completing her scans. Chakra pathways show healthy adaptation to the modified flow patterns, and neural activity has normalized despite the expanded processing capacity. She looked up from her instruments with professional satisfaction. All indicators are positive. If this continues, you should be cleared for discharge tomorrow. Excellent news, Naruto acknowledged with genuine appreciation for her thoroughness. The hospital food is improving my appreciation for Ichiraku ramen by the hour. The small joke reminiscent of his pre-transformation personality brought smiles to everyone present. As Sakura completed her documentation, she added more conversationally, Ino mentioned she'd be stopping by this afternoon. Something about following up on the mind barrier capsule's effectiveness. The seemingly innocent statement carried subtle subtext that wasn't lost on any of the women present. Hinata's expression remained composed, though something flickered briefly in her eyes before being carefully controlled. I look forward to providing that feedback, Naruto replied neutrally, clearly aware of the undercurrents but choosing not to engage them directly. Her contributions to our strategy were significant. With the medical examination complete, Sakura prepared to leave. Your next scheduled visitors are Team 8. They should be arriving shortly. Remember to monitor your energy levels and rest if you experience any integration fluctuations. After she departed, Hanabi excused herself as well, mentioning clan responsibilities that required her attention. Once they were alone, Hinata turned to Naruto with characteristic directness beneath her gentle demeanor. The village is buzzing with speculation about your transformation, she informed him. Some fear it, others see it as a positive evolution, but everyone recognizes that something fundamental has changed in the balance of power. Naruto nodded, unsurprised by this assessment. And the Hyuga clan's position? Divided, she admitted. The elders are cautious, concerned about unpredictable impacts on established power structures. The younger generation is more intrigued, particularly after witnessing my progress with the Tensagen development. And your father? A small smile touched her lips. Surprisingly adaptive. He sees potential advantages in maintaining close alliance with the evolved Uzumaki, as he phrases it. The political implications remained unspoken but understood between them. Hiyashi Hyuga had always been a shrewd strategist. His apparent support likely combined genuine recognition of Naruto's value with calculated assessment of potential benefits to his clan's position. And you? Naruto asked more personally. Now that you've had time to observe the advanced integration, does it concern you? Hinata considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness before responding. What I see is harmony where there could have been conflict, different energies and influences finding balance rather than struggling for dominance. That doesn't concern me, it reassures me. Her perception, as always, cut directly to the heart of the matter. Before Naruto could respond, however, a commotion in the hallway announced the arrival of Team 8. Kiba's boisterous voice carrying clearly through the door moments before it burst open. The conquering hero returns. Kiba announced dramatically as he entered, Akamaru padding faithfully beside him. Shino followed more sedately, while Kurenai brought up the rear with a fond but slightly exasperated expression at her former student's enthusiasm. The visit proceeded with predictable dynamics, Kiba's exuberant questions about the battle interspersed with Shino's more thoughtful inquiries regarding the nature of dimensional manipulation, while Kurenai observed with the experienced eye of a Jonin assessing both tactical implications and personal impact. Throughout the afternoon, a steady stream of visitors continued, friends, colleagues, and various shinobi who had participated in the Allied Forces operation. Each brought their own perspective and reaction to Naruto's transformation, ranging from Choji's straightforward acceptance to Neji's analytical assessment of the chakra adaptations to Lee's enthusiastic declarations about youthful evolution transcending ordinary limitations. As promised, Ino arrived later in the day, bearing a small basket of specialized medicinal herbs and flowers from her family's collection. Unlike some visitors who had treated Naruto with newfound formality, she maintained her characteristic directness, assessing his condition with both medical precision and personal interest. The mental integration patterns have stabilized nicely, she observed after performing a specialized diagnostic technique unique to her clan. The boundaries between your core consciousness and the karma's data structures are clearly defined but permeable where beneficial. Your mind barrier techniques definitely contributed to that stability, Naruto acknowledged. Particularly during the deeper integration phase when Urashiki's influence was more pronounced. Ino nodded, professional satisfaction evident in her expression. I've been developing additional protocols based on what we learned during the battle. If you're willing, I'd like to test them once you're discharged from the hospital. Of course, he agreed readily. The more tools we develop for managing Otsutsuki mental techniques, the better prepared we'll be for future encounters. As evening approached and the stream of visitors finally subsided, Naruto found himself alone on the hospital balcony once more, watching as the village transitioned from day to night. The expanded perception granted by the advanced karma integration revealed fascinating patterns invisible to ordinary sight, residual chakra trails marking the paths of shinobi through the streets, emotional resonances lingering in places of significant interaction, the subtle dimensional currents that flowed beneath the physical reality. Quite a view, isn't it? Came Sasuke's voice from behind him. Naruto didn't turn, having sensed his friend's approach moments before he spoke. Different from what I used to see, but fundamentally the same village. Sasuke moved to stand beside him at the railing, his Rinnegan activated as he perceived some of the same patterns visible to Naruto's enhanced awareness. The council has been in continuous session since our return, he reported without preamble, debating the implications of the Otsutsuki encounter and your evolution. And their conclusions? Naruto inquired, though he had already sensed the general direction of those deliberations through the emotional and chakra patterns emanating from the Hokage Tower. Mixed, Sasuke replied frankly. They recognize the strategic value of your transformation but remain concerned about its unpredictable nature. Tsunade has been advocating for your full reinstatement to active duty, while Danzo and his faction favor a more controlled approach to utilizing your abilities. Unsurprising, Naruto acknowledged without apparent concern. Change always generates resistance, particularly when it affects established power structures. Sasuke studied him with careful assessment. You're taking this remarkably calmly. A slight smile crossed Naruto's face. The karma integration has given me perspective that extends beyond immediate political reactions. I see patterns unfolding across longer timeframes now. Dangerously close to complacency, Sasuke observed with characteristic bluntness. Not complacency, Naruto corrected. Strategic patience. The council's concerns are logical from their perspective and need to be addressed appropriately, not dismissed or overridden. This mature approach seemed to satisfy Sasuke, who nodded slightly before changing the subject. I'm leaving tomorrow. There are dimensional anomalies I need to investigate, potential weaknesses in our world's barriers that the battle may have exposed. The aftermath of Momoshiki's dimensional collapse technique, Naruto surmised. Yes, I've sensed those disturbances as well. They're minor but could expand if left unaddressed. Will you be stable enough to assist when I return? Sasuke asked directly, the question simultaneously professional and personal. Yes, Naruto confirmed. The integration has reached a sustainable equilibrium. My capabilities continue to expand as I learn to access more of the embedded knowledge, but the process no longer threatens stability. They stood in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the village below as lights began to illuminate the darkening streets. Finally, Sasuke spoke again, his tone uncharacteristically reflective. When we were children, you spoke constantly of becoming Hokage, of being acknowledged by the village. Now that you've evolved beyond what most Hokage could ever achieve, what drives you? The profound question deserved careful consideration. Naruto contemplated it before responding with equal thoughtfulness. The fundamental motivation hasn't changed: protecting those precious to me, ensuring this world can thrive in peace. What's evolved is my understanding of what that requires and the scope of threats we face. After a brief pause, he added, the title itself matters less than the purpose it represents. Sasuke nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Just ensure that as your perspective expands, you don't lose sight of the specific bonds that anchored you in the first place. Power without connection leads down paths neither of us should revisit. The subtle reference to Sasuke's own past struggles with isolation and power wasn't lost on Naruto, who acknowledged the wisdom with appropriate gravity. A valid caution. Fortunately, I have friends who won't hesitate to remind me of exactly that. With a faint smile that acknowledged this truth, Sasuke prepared to depart. I'll check in before I leave tomorrow. Try not to destabilize dimensional reality while I'm gone. After his friend had left, Naruto remained on the balcony, his enhanced perception extending beyond the village to the surrounding forests and, further still, to the repaired dimensional fabric that separated their world from others. The battle had changed many things, not just his own nature, but the shinobi world's understanding of its place in a much larger cosmos. The path ahead contained both promise and challenge. The karma integration would continue to evolve, granting access to greater abilities while requiring careful balance to maintain his core identity. The village and its leadership would need time to adapt to these changes, moving from uncertainty to acceptance as the benefits became more apparent than the risks. And beyond these immediate concerns lay the larger reality. The karma had revealed a multiverse where the Otsutsuki clan's harvesting operations continued on countless worlds, and where beings like Momoshiki were merely middle-tier representatives of a much larger hierarchy. As night fully claimed the sky, Naruto finally turned from the balcony, returning to his hospital room with resolved determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them not as a vessel for alien power, but as Naruto Uzumaki evolved, expanded, but fundamentally unchanged in his core values and commitments. The path of integration rather than consumption would define his approach, not just to the karma, but to all aspects of the journey ahead. 2 weeks after the battle at the Valley of the End, life in Konoha had begun returning to a semblance of normalcy, albeit a normalcy forever altered by their encounter with the Otsutsuki. The allied shinobi forces had disbanded their formal operational structure, though stronger cooperation remained between the 5 great nations than had existed before the shared threat united them. Naruto had been officially discharged from the hospital 5 days after his return to the village, though Tsunade's medical team continued to monitor his condition through regular examinations. The karma integration had stabilized at approximately 70%, with no further physical expansion occurring during the past week. More significant than the physical manifestation was his growing mastery of the abilities and knowledge the integration had provided. Each day brought new insights as he learned to access and apply different aspects of the embedded information, training in specialized facilities established specifically for his unique requirements. On this particular morning, he stood in Training Ground 11, the secluded area still protected by privacy seals that allowed unrestricted practice of his more unusual abilities. Across from him, Hinata maintained a combat-ready stance, her evolving Tenseigen activated as they engaged in their regular training session. Again, Naruto instructed, his karma patterns glowing subtly as he established a specialized dimensional field around them, a training construct that allowed for advanced techniques without risking damage to the surrounding environment. Focus on perceiving the dimensional layers rather than just the physical form. Hinata nodded, the blue-tinted pupils of her evolving dujutsu tracking movements that existed partially outside conventional space-time. With practiced precision, she launched forward, her modified gentle fist techniques targeting not just chakra points but the dimensional anchors Naruto had established within his defensive formation. The exchange that followed would have appeared almost incomprehensible to normal observers, portions of their movements occurring in dimensional phases slightly offset from ordinary reality, chakra patterns interacting in complex harmonics that transcended conventional combat techniques. Excellent, Naruto commented as they concluded the sequence, genuine approval in his voice. Your perception of the dimensional substructure has improved significantly. You're tracking approximately 60% of the phase shifts now. Hinata deactivated her evolved Byakugan, taking a moment to rest and reorient herself to normal perception. The advanced training was demanding, requiring precise chakra control and exceptional concentration. The Tenseigen development is accelerating, she observed, accepting a water bottle he offered. Particularly since I began incorporating the harmonic meditation techniques you taught me. Your natural affinity for the evolution is remarkable, Naruto acknowledged. Most Hyuga would require years to achieve what you've accomplished in weeks. A light blush colored her cheeks at the praise, though her confidence had grown substantially since beginning these specialized training sessions. The techniques feel increasingly natural, less like applying external methods and more like accessing abilities that were always potential within the Byakugan. That's precisely the correct approach, he confirmed, pleased by her insight. The Tenseigen isn't a separate power grafted onto the Byakugan, but rather its evolved state when properly harmonized with celestial energy. They continued their training for another hour, focusing on the integration of Tenseigen perceptive abilities with modified gentle fist techniques. By the session's conclusion, both were satisfied with the progress made, though Hinata showed signs of the chakra depletion such advanced practice inevitably cause. We should conclude for today, Naruto suggested, noting her condition with concern. Pushing beyond optimal training thresholds risks disrupting the Tenseigen's development pattern. Hinata nodded agreement, though her determination to master these techniques remained evident in her expression. As they gathered their equipment and prepared to leave the training ground, she broached a topic that had clearly been on her mind. The Hyuga elders have requested a formal demonstration of my progress, she informed him. They're particularly interested in the potential applications of the Tenseigen for clan techniques. Political implications? Naruto inquired, immediately grasping the subtext of such a request. Significant ones, she confirmed. My father believes this evolution could strengthen the Hyuga's position considerably, particularly in light of the changing power dynamics since your transformation. The observation was astute. The karma integration had indeed altered political balances within Konoha and beyond, as various factions positioned themselves relative to this new reality. And your perspective on their request? He asked, genuinely interested in her assessment rather than merely offering guidance. Hinata considered carefully before responding. I believe controlled demonstration would be beneficial, showing enough to confirm the evolution's validity without revealing its full capabilities or the specific methods we've developed. Strategic transparency, Naruto observed with approval. Addressing their legitimate interest while maintaining necessary boundaries, a balanced approach. They had reached the edge of the training ground where their paths would naturally diverge, Hinata toward the Hyuga compound, Naruto toward the special research facility established near the Hokage Tower. "Will you attend the council meeting this afternoon?" Hinata asked, referring to the scheduled discussion of dimensional security protocols that had been established following the Otsutsuki encounter. "Yes," Naruto confirmed. "Tsunade has requested my input on the sensory grid specifications, particularly the calibration for detecting subtle dimensional disturbances." Something in his tone suggested additional concerns beyond the technical aspects of the system. Hinata, with her characteristic perceptiveness, immediately noticed. "You've sensed something," she stated rather than asked, "beyond the aftereffects of the battle." Naruto nodded, appreciating as always her intuitive understanding. "Nothing immediate or threatening, but yes, there are dimensional currents shifting in ways that suggest longer-term patterns we should monitor. Related to what you discussed with Sasuke before his departure. Connected, though distinct," he clarified. "The anomalies Sasuke is investigating are direct results of Momoshiki's techniques. What I'm sensing are more subtle shifts in the broader dimensional fabric, ripples spreading outward from our encounter that may have drawn attention we didn't anticipate." The implication wasn't lost on Hinata, whose evolving perceptive abilities allowed her to grasp concepts that would have seemed abstract before their specialized training. The higher Otsutsuki hierarchy, she surmised. Those Momoshiki answered to. Potentially, Naruto acknowledged. Though their perception of time differs significantly from ours. Any response would likely unfold over months or years rather than days or weeks. This sobering assessment created a moment of shared concern between them, the recognition that their victory, while significant, might have placed their world more firmly on the cosmic radar of beings whose power dwarfed even Momoshiki's. Before parting, Hinata reached out and gently touched the karma markings visible on Naruto's hand. Where their skin connected, a subtle resonance occurred, her evolving Tensagen energy harmonizing naturally with the karma's patterns in a way that brought comfort to both. "Whatever comes," she said simply, "we'll face it together." The straightforward statement carried layers of meaning that transcended their current circumstances, a promise that encompassed both personal connection and shared purpose. Naruto acknowledged it with equal simplicity, his hand briefly clasping hers. "Together," he agreed. As they parted ways, Naruto continued toward the research facility, his enhanced perception allowing him to observe the village with multiple layers of awareness simultaneously. The physical structures and people going about their daily activities occupied the most immediate level, while chakra flows and emotional resonances formed a second layer of perception. Beyond these, the subtle dimensional currents and cosmic energies that intersected with their reality constituted a third level of awareness, one that had become increasingly clear as the karma integration stabilized. Upon reaching the research facility, he found Ino already present, working with a team of sensor-type shinobi on calibrating the detection grid that now surrounded Konoha. The network of specialized sensors had been designed based on knowledge extracted from the karma, providing early warning of dimensional disturbances similar to those that had heralded Momoshiki's arrival. "You're early," Ino observed as he entered, looking up from the complex array of monitoring equipment. "We weren't expecting you until after the council meeting. Thought I'd review the latest sensitivity adjustments before making recommendations," Naruto explained, moving to examine the readouts displaying dimensional stability parameters across various sectors of the village. Ino dismissed the other technicians with a brief gesture, waiting until they had left before addressing him more directly. "These aren't just routine calibrations, are they? You've sensed something specific." Her perceptiveness was one of the qualities Naruto had always appreciated, even before his transformation. Now, with her specialized training in mental techniques complementing his expanded awareness, their professional interactions had developed a synchronized efficiency that benefited both their individual work and the village's security protocols. "Subtle shifts in the dimensional currents," he confirmed, adjusting several parameters on the monitoring array to display the patterns he had detected. "Nothing acute enough to trigger alerts under current settings, but potentially significant when viewed across extended timeframes." Ino studied the adjusted display with focused attention, her trained mind quickly grasping the implications. "Directional patterns," she observed. "Not random fluctuations but organized movement, almost like communication." Naruto completed her thought. "Precisely. The dimensional fabric doesn't just separate physical spaces, it can carry information across vast distances when manipulated correctly. This revelation created a moment of sobering realization between them. If the dimensional disturbances represented communication rather than merely aftermath effects, it suggested active interest in their world from entities beyond their immediate experience. We should adjust the detection parameters, Eno concluded practically. Establish pattern recognition algorithms specifically calibrated for these communication signatures. Already working on the specifications, Naruto confirmed, producing a data scroll containing detailed adjustments for the sensor network. These modifications will increase sensitivity to the specific frequency ranges while filtering out background dimensional noise. As they worked together implementing these adjustments, the professional focus gradually shifted to include more personal awareness. Eno's chakra signature reflected subtle emotional currents beneath her composed exterior: curiosity about his continued evolution, concern regarding the implications of their discoveries, and something more complex related to their personal dynamic. Your integration has stabilized completely, she observed during a break in their technical work. The mental architecture shows remarkable harmony between your core identity and the integrated knowledge structures. Your techniques contributed significantly to that stability, Naruto acknowledged, particularly the mental shielding protocols we developed before the battle. Eno smiled, professional pride evident in her expression. My clan has been documenting the entire process. The applications for other forms of mental integration and protection are potentially revolutionary. This scientific interest was genuine, but Naruto's enhanced perception detected the additional layers beneath it: personal interest that extended beyond professional curiosity. Before either could address these undercurrents, however, a messenger arrived requesting Naruto's immediate presence at the Hokage Tower. The council meeting had been moved forward due to developing situations requiring immediate attention. We'll continue this later, Naruto promised as he prepared to depart. The calibration adjustments should be completed by tomorrow morning. I'll oversee the implementation personally, Eno assured him. Then, with the directness that characterized their interactions, she added, and Naruto, when things settle down a bit, we should discuss that unfinished business I mentioned after the battle. Some matters shouldn't wait indefinitely, even with extended lifespans. The reference to their previous conversation carried clear intent that wasn't lost on him. With an acknowledging nod that contained neither commitment nor rejection but respectful recognition of her statement, he departed for the Hokage Tower. The council chamber was already filled when he arrived. Representatives from various village departments and clan heads arranged around the large table with Tsunade presiding from the head position. Conversation quieted as he entered, a mixture of reactions evident in the assembled leaders: respect, curiosity, lingering wariness, and calculated assessment. Uzumaki Naruto, Tsunade acknowledged formally, gesturing to an empty seat that had been positioned at her right hand, a placement not lost on the politically astute members present. Thank you for joining us on short notice. Of course, Lady Hokage, he replied with equal formality, taking the indicated position. The subtle political statement of his placement was intentional on Tsunade's part. He realized a clear indicator of her position regarding his status despite the ongoing debates about the implications of his transformation. We've received reports from our border outposts of unusual chakra manifestations, Tsunade explained without preamble. Similar incidents have been reported by our allies in Suna and Kumo. The patterns are inconsistent with known techniques but share certain characteristics with the energy signatures observed during the Otsutsuki encounter. This information immediately captured Naruto's full attention. Locations and frequency? Shikaku Nara, who was coordinating the intelligence assessment, activated a map display at the center of the table. 7 confirmed incidents within the past 48 hours. No clear geographic pattern, but all occurred at sites with historically significant chakra concentrations. The locations illuminated on the map created a concerning picture. Each site represented a place where the dimensional fabric had unique properties, often tied to ancient events or natural chakra convergences. Probes, Naruto stated after studying the pattern. Systematic testing of our dimensional barriers at structurally significant points. His assessment created a ripple of unease among the council members, who recognized the implications. If these manifestations represented deliberate testing rather than random anomalies, it suggested coordinated interest in their world from beyond. Can you determine the source? Homura, one of the elder counselors, inquired with thinly veiled concern. Not precisely, Naruto replied honestly. The signatures bear similarities to Otsutsuki energy patterns but contain elements I haven't encountered before even within the karma's embedded knowledge. Which suggests entities beyond even Urashiki's experience, Tsunade concluded grimly. Potentially from higher levels of the hierarchy you've described. Danzo Shimura, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke from his position across the table. The question before this council is not merely identification but response. If these are indeed probes from entities beyond our current understanding, what actions can or should we take? The question was pointed but valid, addressing the practical reality they faced. Naruto considered carefully before responding, aware that his answer would significantly influence the council's decisions. 3 immediate actions, he proposed. First, enhanced monitoring, adjusting our sensor networks to detect and track these specific energy signatures. Second, defensive reinforcement at the identified convergence points, specialized sealing techniques that can stabilize dimensional weaknesses without drawing additional attention. And third, knowledge expansion, accelerated research into the dimensional mechanics revealed through the karma integration. The comprehensive nature of this proposal seemed to satisfy most council members, who recognized both the immediate pragmatism and longer-term strategic considerations it addressed. And if these probes escalate to actual incursions? Kaharu, the other elder counselor, pressed. Then we implement containment and response protocols similar to those deployed against Momoshiki, but adapted to the specific nature of any new threat, Naruto replied calmly. The karma integration continues to provide insights into Otsutsuki vulnerabilities and tactical approaches. The discussion continued for several hours, moving from immediate security concerns to longer-term strategic considerations. Throughout, Naruto provided information and assessments drawn from the integrated knowledge, carefully balancing transparency with appropriate restraint regarding certain more advanced concepts their current scientific and chakra understanding couldn't yet fully contextualize. By the meeting's conclusion, concrete action plans had been established, responsibilities assigned, and monitoring protocols enhanced. As the council members departed, Tsunade gestured for Naruto to remain behind, waiting until they were alone before speaking more personally. You handled that well, she observed, pouring herself a small cup of sake from a bottle discreetly kept in her desk drawer. Informative without being alarming, directive without overstepping authority boundaries. A balanced approach seemed appropriate, Naruto replied, declining the offered drink with a polite gesture. The situation requires awareness without panic, preparation without escalation. Tsunade studied him over the rim of her cup, her experienced eyes assessing both his visible condition and the less obvious aspects of his continued evolution. The political dynamics around your transformation are stabilizing, she informed him. Initial wariness is gradually shifting toward pragmatic acceptance, particularly as the benefits become more apparent than the theoretical risks.